orders of the day. Orders of the day.
Government orders, government bills, comments, resuming consideration at second reading of Bill C-97, Budget Implementation Act 2019, number 1, and on the amendment of Ms. Gladue.
Very good. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader has a point of order.
Yes, point of order, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to respond to a point of order raised by the Honourable Member from Vancouver East on April 10, 2019, with respect to the status of Bill C-97, the Budget Implementation Act 2019, number 1. In her statement, my honourable colleague argued that since multiple items were included in Bill C-97, then the bill should be treated as an omnibus bill. Her view was that these measures were unrelated to the budget. In her argument, the honourable opposition member argued that subdivisions B, D, E, F, G, J, K, and L of Division 9, Part 4 amended different acts, that Part 4 of Division 15, Section 292 to 302 created a new act, and Part 4 of Division 16, Clauses 302 to 311 made changes to the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act, that Bill C-97 was an omnibus bill, and as such should be divided for further considerations. I would argue, Mr. Speaker, that this is not the case. As you know, and as the opposition members pointed out in her point of order, Standing Order 69.1 bracket 2 states clearly that Standing Order 69.1 bracket 1, and I would quote, Mr. Speaker, shall not apply if the bill has as its main purpose the implementation of a budget and contains only provisions that were announced in the budget presentation or in the documents tabled during the budget presentation, end of quote. Consequently, I would like to point out that subdivision B, E, F, G, J, K, and L of Division 9 of Part 4 of Bill C-97, which amends different regulatory acts, are all alluded to at page 326 of the Budget 2019. Next to the subject bringing innovation to regulations, it is written, and I quote, Mr. Speaker, the government proposes to introduce legislation to begin its work on an annual modernization bill consisting of legislative amendments to various statutes to help eliminate outdated federal regulations and better keep existing regulations up to date, end of quote. The amendments quoted by the honourable member are all part of that effort to modernize existing regulations. As for subdivision D of the aforementioned division, it is even more explicitly referenced at page 119, which states, next to the removing federal barriers to the interprovincial trade of alcohol subject to, and I would quote, Mr. Speaker, to facilitate internal trade, the government intends to remove the federal requirement that alcohol moving from one province to another be sold or consigned to a provincial liquor authority. Provinces and territories would continue to be able to regulate the sale and distribution of alcohol within their boundaries, end of quote. Furthermore, Part 4 of Division 15, Section 292 to 302 of the BIA, which relates to the creation of the College of Immigration and Citizenship Consultants Act, is referred to at page 184 and 185 of the budget under the heading Protecting People from Unscrupulous Immigration Consultants. It is stated, quote, to help protect newcomers and applicants wishing to obtain the services of legitimate service providers, Budget 2019 proposes to provide $51.9 million over 5 years, starting in the 2019-20 and $10.1 million per year ongoing. Funding will improve oversight of immigration consultants and strengthen compliance and enforcement measures. It will also support public awareness activities that will help vulnerable newcomers and applicants protect themselves against fraudulent immigration consultants. These measures will help to ensure that all applicants have access to quality immigration and citizenship advice, and that those who are providing the services operate in a professional and ethical manner, with disciplinary powers in place should fraud or misrepresentation occur. In addition, the government proposes to introduce legislation and propose amendments to the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act and Citizenship in order to implement these measures. End of quote. This is echoed at page 326, where it clearly states, next to the subject protecting people from unscrupulous immigration consultants, and again I would quote, the government proposes to introduce legislation and propose amendments to the Immigration and Refugees Protection Act and the Citizenship Act in order to implement measures to help protect newcomers and applicants wishing to obtain the services of legitimate service providers. End of quote. Finally, Mr. Speaker, Part 4, Division 16, Clauses 302 to 311, which makes changes to the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act, is consequent with what is found once again on page 184 under the heading Enhancing the Integrity of Canada's Borders and Asylum System. It states, and again, quote, Budget 2019 proposes to introduce legislative amendments to the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act to better manage, discourage, and prevent irregular immigration. End of quote. Once again, this is echoed on page 326 of the budget, next to the subject enhancing the integrity of Canada's borders and asylum system. And again, Mr. Speaker, I would quote, the government proposes to introduce legislative amendments to the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act to better manage, discourage, and prevent irregular migration. End of quote. As such, I believe that the measures contained in Bill C-97 were all included in the budget. Consequently, I respectfully submit that Bill C-97 is not an omnibus bill and, as such, should not be split. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I want to thank the honourable member for his intervention, and the Speaker will come back with a response in due course. Resuming debate, reprise du débat, the honourable member for Richmond Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to inform you that I'll be splitting my time with the honourable member from Scarborough Centre. Mr. Speaker, honourable colleagues, it is a pleasure to rise in this House to speak about Budget 2019, Bill C-97. For the past 4 years, our government has invested in Canadians and in what matters to them the most. And Budget 2019 continues that plan by investing in something that matters to all Canadians, their health. We all know the sinking feeling that comes when you hear a loved one is sick or badly hurt. The clock seems to stop and it's hard to think about anything else, especially how much money you have saved in the bank. But, Mr. Speaker, the sad reality is too many Canadians have to think about finances at moments of such threat. We are proud of our publicly funded universal healthcare system, connecting Canadians to the best healthcare system, connecting Canadians to the best doctors, nurses, healthcare providers based on their needs. But when it comes to prescription drugs, not everyone has access to what they need to regain and maintain their health. Many middle-class Canadians and those struggling hard to join the middle class can't afford the prescription drugs they need. No one, Mr. Speaker, should have to choose between putting food on the table and buying prescription drugs. No one. So our system can and must be improved. Because when prescription drugs are unaffordable, it leads to poorer health for many Canadians and higher healthcare costs for all of us. It is true that most Canadians have some form of public or private drug coverage. However, the nature of that coverage varies significantly from person to person across the country. To improve the accessibility and affordability of prescription medications, the government announced in Budget 2018 the creation of an advisory council. This council is providing advice on how to implement the National Pharmacare Plan in a manner that's affordable for Canadians, employers, and governments. So, Mr. Speaker, With Budget 2019, we are laying the foundation for the implementation of a national pharmacare program while we await the final report by our advisory council on its full implementation. Based on the consultation and interim report of the advisory council on the implementation of the national pharmacare, our government intends to work with provinces, territories, the private sector, and other partners on three foundational elements. Number one, creating the Canadian Drug Agency, which will assess drug effectiveness and negotiate prices. Second, establishing an evidence-based list of prescribed drugs, a list of drugs Canadians can access to be developed as part of the agency. Third, establishing a national strategy for high-cost drugs for rare diseases. I would like to speak about these three items, specific measures, and should I have some time remaining, Mr. Speaker, I would like to also touch and take a quick aside to discuss Budget 2019, strong emphasis on issues facing seniors in our communities like mine. Mr. Speaker, I will start with the first foundational element, assessing drug effectiveness and negotiating prices. The new Canadian Drug Agency, through its ability to negotiate prices, will lead to lower prices for the prescription drugs. And that's a very good news. It's a good news because right now, Canada faces some of the highest drug costs in the world. Costs have risen dramatically over the last 3 decades. Prescription drugs in Canada was about $2.5 billion in 1985. In 2018, it was nearly $34 million. The cost keeps rising. Sorry, Mr. Speaker, it was $34 billion, and the costs keep rising. Canada's current patchwork of drug coverage is not well equipped to handle the increasing expensive drug coming to the market. Mr. Speaker, there are over 100 public prescription drug insurance companies in Canada and over 100,000 private insurance plans. The Canadian Drug Agency will help making things better by negotiating drug prices on behalf of Canada's drug plans. The agency will also assess the effectiveness of the new prescription drugs and recommend which drugs represent the best value for money for Canadians. For the first time in Canada, Mr. Speaker, drug evaluation and price negotiation could be carried out by one single entity. This was one of the initial recommendations included in the interim report of the Advisory Council on the implementation of National Pharmacare. The Canadian Drug Agency will be established in partnership, as I said, with provinces, territories, and all other stakeholders. It will build on existing provincial successes by acting as a single evaluator and negotiator on behalf of the Canada's drug plans. The proposed agency could help to considerably reduce the drug spending. Mr. Speaker, the Canadian Drug Agency could in long term lead to billions of dollars in saving on prescription drug costs each year. In short, the Canadian Drug Agency can be a powerful tool for addressing the rising costs of the prescription drugs across Canada. Second, the second foundational element is establishing a new national formulary for prescribed drugs. One of the Canadian Drug Agency key responsibility would be to develop the development of a national formulary. The agency would work in partnership with provinces, territories, and other stakeholders to develop a comprehensive, evidence-based list of prescribed drugs. This would provide the basis for a consistent approach to formulary listing and patients' access across the country. Therefore, Budget 2019 proposed to provide Health Canada with $35 million over 4 years to establish a transition office to support the development of this vision. Third, the third foundational element is making high-cost drugs for rare diseases more accessible. The final aspect I would like to discuss is what Budget 2019 means for Canadians who require high-cost prescription drugs to treat their diseases. For these Canadians, the cost of medication they need can be astronomical. It's worth noting, Mr. Speaker, that rare diseases predominantly affect children. These diseases are often genetically based and appear in early childhood. More than 7,000 rare diseases have been identified to date. However, each one of them affects a relatively small number of patients, which make decision on drug approval and coverage very difficult. The list price of some of these drugs often exceed $100,000 per patient per year. In some cases, it's even more. This obviously creates significant distress for these patients and their families. These costs also represent significant challenges to the government and private drug plans when it comes to making decisions on whether and how to pay for the treatment. This can lead to challenges for many provinces and territories looking to help families. This is why we need a national approach to drug for rare diseases. Mr. Speaker, Canada's national strategy will be created in partnership again with the province and territories. It will allow for a coordinated approach for gathering and evaluating evidence, improve consistently in decision-making and access across the country, and ensures that the effective treatment reach the patients who need them the most. Budget 2019 proposes up to $1 billion over 2 years starting in 2022 with up to $500 million per year ongoing to help Canadians with rare diseases. Mr. Speaker, less than 1 minute on seniors and how they're impacted in my fixed income senior, the choice to continue to work without being penalized. We will begin proactive CPP employment at age 70 to ensure that no senior misses out on benefit they are entitled to. Among many others, we are increasing the transparency and will launch an initiative to change the corporate laws to increase oversight and grant courts a greater ability to review payments made to executives in the lead-up to insolvency, protecting workplace patients from predatory practices. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, I, like many of my colleagues, look forward to reading the final report from the Advisory Council on the implementation of National Pharmacare, which is due later this spring. Moving forward, our National Pharmacare will help lead to protecting the health of every Canadian. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires, l'honorable député.
The honourable member for Sherbrooke. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't know if my colleague realizes that he spent a lot of his speech talking about pharmacare and the fact that it's been nearly 25 years now that the Liberals have been promising universal pharmacare. In his speech, he has essentially asked Canadians and this House to wait even longer, to wait for an expert report, to wait until the program is set up. So can he explain why, after 25 years, the Liberals still are not ready to deliver the goods? Why are they still calling for meetings and panels and more analysis? What's the problem?
Member for Richmond Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the honourable member for Sherbrooke for asking the question. I cannot talk about the past 25 years, but I can talk about what our government has done. Our government, shortly after coming to power, started the process on the pharmacare. I can talk about the fact that almost all the members within our caucus are very supportive of pharmacare. And I draw on my background as a management consultant. You don't launch into doing such a huge initiative by just blindly coming up with a plan or an act. What you do consultation, you put a very top advisory team together, the research is done, and a decision is made. We're looking forward to seeing the report, but I can assure you that from the first step that's been taken and the recommendations that are made, we're well in our way to be able to implement a national pharmacare.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Guelph.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the honourable member from Richmond Hill for his speech today, as also his work as the chair of the All-Party Mental Health Caucus. As he knows, suicide has a profound effect in Canada. For every suicide death, there are 5 self-inflicted injury hospitalizations, 25 to 30 attempts. We have 7 to 10 people profoundly affected by suicide loss. Could the honourable member comment on the Government of Canada's investments in mental health, particularly in suicide prevention programs indicated in Budget 2019? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Richmond Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my honourable colleague from Guelph, and I appreciate his strong advocacy on the mental health file and his unyielding support on this initiative. Mr. Speaker, specifically as it relates to the question in Budget 2019, government announced a pan-Canadian suicide prevention service. It's about $25 million over 5 years, with another $5 million 1 year per year and thereafter. But the most important thing is there was other initiatives in 2017 and 2018 vis-a-vis the mental health. In 2017, the largest amount of investment in mental health was tabled, $11 billion over 10 years to support home care as well as mental health, specifically about $5 billion of it going to the mental health. And in Budget 2018, about $20 million over 5 years for commitment to projects that helps focus on seniors and women living with dementia. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Une comments, questions et commentaires, l'honorable.
The honourable member for Pont-Jacques-Cartier. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the member for Richmond Hill for his speech. Now, as the member for Pont-Jacques-Cartier, I've seen the Liberal government being in power for the last 3.5 years. And what I've understood from this speech, I mean, I'll just follow up on what my NDP colleague said. He was talking about the last 25 years. Well, I've seen that for the last 3.5 years, the Liberals have always said they're going to start a process. They're going to set up a panel. They're going to consult. They're going to have a committee. They're going to have a study. They're going to have policies. They talk about 2022. They talk about years after 2022. So how can we trust this government who's been in power for 3.5 years when they haven't done anything? What am I supposed to tell seniors in my riding who want concrete help today? There's nothing I can tell them. There's nothing that has actually been delivered by this Liberal government. So how can he be proud of what has been tabled by the Minister of Finance?
Member for Richmond Hill in 30 seconds or less, please.
Thank you. First of all, let me say how proud I am of the accomplishment of our government. And one thing that the honourable member has to remember, that this is a partnership. And I emphasized that in my speech a number of times. This is not something that we can do overnight, and this is not something that we could do alone. Therefore, it requires partnership, and it requires making sure that we spend the time that's needed to be able to do it right. Thank you.
Resuming debate, reprise du débat, the honourable member for Scarborough Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I haven't had the opportunity to speak at length in this place for some time, and I'm happy to have the opportunity to rise today on Bill C-97 and to speak to some of the initiatives in our government's budget that are going to make a difference for my constituents in Scarborough Centre. This is our government's 4th budget, Mr. Speaker, and it is the continuation of the plan that Canadians voted for in 2015, a plan that is working. Back in 2015, Canadians had a choice between Conservative and NDP plans for austerity and cuts, and a Liberal plan for investing in growing the middle class and those working hard to join it. Canadians choose to invest in our future, and their decision is paying off. Today, Canada's economy is one of the fastest growing in the G7. Since 2015, Canadians have created more than 900,000 new jobs. And thanks to the middle class tax cut and the tax-free Canada Child Benefit, Canadian families have more money in their pockets to help make ends meet. But we recognize that our work is not yet done. Mr. Speaker, we need to ensure that all Canadians share in the growing prosperity. That means being able to find an affordable place to live, getting the skills to find a well-paying job, being able to retire with confidence. That's why it's important we don't allow the clock to be turned back to the Harper era, and that we keep investing in Canadians and in our future. Before I get to some of those investments, allow me to touch on another area of focus in Budget 2019, keeping Canadians safe from violence and hate. Canadians of all backgrounds and identities should always feel safe to gather together Unfortunately, as recent tragic events have demonstrated, certain groups of people, because of their race, religion, or sexual orientation, are at risk of being targeted by hate-motivated crimes, threatening their safety and security and the gathering places they enjoy. To help, community gathering spaces such as schools, community centers, and places of worship make needed security improvements, we are doubling the annual funding for the Security Infrastructure Program from $2 million per year to $4 million per year. Several faith organizations in Scarborough Center have already leveraged this program to upgrade their security infrastructure, and I encourage all eligible institutions to take advantage of this program. We all know that diversity is one of Canada's strengths, but sadly, we know that Canada is not immune to the effects of hateful rhetoric. That's why Budget 2019 invests $45 million to support a new anti-racism strategy. It will work to find ways to counter racism in its various forms with a strong focus on community-based projects. While we cannot be blind to the threats, Mr. Speaker, I know most of my fellow Canadians are a warm and welcoming people that reject fear, racism, and division. What unites us all, Mr. Speaker, is our shared desire to provide opportunity for our families, and this budget makes a number of important investments in that regard. Perhaps the biggest issue I hear about at the doors in Scarborough is about housing. Buying a home is increasingly out of reach for the average family, and rental housing is often outdated, overpriced, and inadequate to the needs of many families. Everyone deserves a safe and affordable place to live, but in Greater Toronto Area, too many are being priced out of the market. The Harper government did nothing to address the housing affordability for 10 years. They were missing in action, leaving the provinces, the municipalities, and the community organizations to try to pick up the slack. But with our 10-year, $40 billion national housing strategy, the federal government is finally back at the table when it comes to housing. I had the opportunity to join the Prime Minister and the Minister of Families, Children and Social Development in Scarborough, where our government committed $1.3 billion to help repair and renovate more than 58,000 Toronto community housing units. This will allow for long-delayed repairs to be completed and will improve the quality of life for thousands of Toronto families. And we are building on these investments in Budget 2019. The new first-time home buyer incentive will make home ownership more affordable for first-time home buyers and allow them to lower their monthly mortgages. On a newly built $400,000 home, this new incentive would save an eligible home buyer up to $40,000 or 10% of the total cost. We expect as many as 100,000 Canadians could benefit from this program over the next 3 years, putting the dream of home ownership back within reach. I've spoken with independent experts in the real estate industry who tell me this program will mean more families will be able to enter the housing market, especially younger families just starting out. Families like Samir Ahmed in my riding, whose wife and 3 children are cramped today in a 2-bedroom apartment, they can now dream of a home in which their family has the room to grow and thrive. And the more flexible home buyers plan will let Canadians borrow an additional $10,000 from their RRSPs, raising the limit to $35,000, providing more flexibility for Canadians. For Canadians looking to rent rather than buy, increased funding for rental construction finance initiative means 42,500 new rental units across Canada. It's so important that we build capacity in the rental housing market where supply far outstrips demand and much of the existing supply increasingly old and out of date. I'm also excited about the Canada Training Benefit. It is an initiative very similar to one brought as a policy to last spring's Liberal Policy Convention developed by a group of youth in my riding. And it addressed a challenge identified by many of their peers, the challenge of lifelong learning and reskilling for an ever-changing economy throughout our lives. to ensure Canadians have the skills they need to get the well-paying jobs of the new economy, we are introducing the Canada Training Benefit. Canadians earning less than $150,000 can accumulate up to $5,000 tax-free over their lives at a rate of $250 per year. To help with the cost of enrolling in a training program, every 4 years, they can take up to 4 weeks of training to upgrade their skills and progress in their careers. With the EI Training Support Benefit, they will get help with living expenses while on training leave. And new leave provisions will make sure their jobs are safe. While Canadians will need to supplement these resources with their own, this program will make it much easier for Canadian workers to invest in their careers and in themselves. Speaking of young Canadians, Mr. Speaker, we are helping our youth get ahead by lowering interest rates for student loans, saving the average borrower $2,000. We are also making the 6-month grace period after graduation interest-free. And if you temporarily leave your studies to have a child or deal with the health issues, that period is now interest-free too. And we are helping students gain real-world experience by creating up to 40,000 annual new work placements and another 44,000 work-integrated work opportunities for Canadian students. And while the Conservatives were only focused on pushing back the age of retirement, we are committed to supporting our seniors, and with this budget, we are making their lives more affordable. We are making sure that working seniors can keep more of their hard-earned income by enhancing the Guaranteed Income Supplement earnings exemption. We are increasing the earnings exemption from $3,500 to $5,000, extending the exemption to include self-employment income, and introducing a 50% exemption in income between $5,000 and $15,000. To fight social isolation and help seniors stay active and engaged in the community, we are increasing funding for the New Horizons for Seniors program. This program funds community-based projects designed to meet the needs of local seniors. I have seen firsthand in Scarborough the benefits of this program brings to local seniors. For example, the Sheshami Foundation is using a New Horizon grant to familiarize seniors with the technology and help arm them with valuable financial literacy skills. As I said earlier, Mr. Speaker, our plan is working. I know this because since 2015, 825,000 Canadians have been lifted out of poverty, and Canada's poverty rate has dropped by more than 20%. And as I also said earlier, there is still more work to do. That's why we have launched Canada's first ever poverty reduction strategy. Under this strategy, we are setting poverty reduction targets and entrenching Canada's official poverty line and the National Advisory Council into law. Mr. Speaker, I could go on and on about the positive elements in this Budget Implementation Act. Instead, let me just say I am proud to be part of a government that is investing in Canadians, because truly there can be no better bet than to bet on Canada. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
In comments, questions et commentaires. The honourable member for Sarnia-Lambton.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague across the aisle for her commentary. One of the things that I think is missing in Budget 2019 has to do with diabetes. There's 11 million Canadians that have diabetes or pre-diabetes, and Diabetes Canada came with an ask for the budget for their 360 plan to address this chronic disease, and yet there was nothing in the budget. Can the member explain why the government is not supporting that initiative, or will she commit that they will?
The honourable member for Scarborough Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would like to thank the honourable member for her question. We have committed into many health initiatives, mental health, home care. In 2017, we committed over $11 billion in mental health and home care. That is helping the seniors to have a more a life where they can be more healthy, they can live in their homes, and it is really making a difference in the lives of those seniors. And many.
Questions and comments? The
honourable member for Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank my colleague for her speech, particularly with the emphasis that she put on the need to fight racism, xenophobia, and intolerance. Of course, on this side, we support those exact same ideas. So leading means making choices, Mr. Speaker, and we have a government that continues to tax medical prescription cannabis for people who are sick and who need it because they are in pain, but they keep taxing cannabis. And then at the same time, they're giving $12 million to Loblaws to buy fridges. I don't understand how a company that earned $3 billion in profits last year would need our money, public money, to buy new fridges. And at the same time, they continue to tax sick people who need cannabis.
Scarborough Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would like to thank the honourable member for his question. We have low taxes for the middle class people. We are investing in the middle class, and that shows that since 2015, when we came into power, the Canadians have created over 900,000 new jobs. We are the fastest growing economy in the G7, and we take diversity as one of our biggest strengths, and we will fight for that in Canada, regardless of from where you came from, when you came. This is a land of opportunity for everyone.
Yeah.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. The honourable member for Don Valley East.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank my honourable member from Scarborough for her extensive presentation and for talking about the issues that matter most to Canadians. These are pocketbook issues, like making home ownership affordable, like helping workers get their skills. And I'd like her to talk about how, within her riding, the young people who need skill sets, who want to go for the jobs of the future, how is the government helping workers get the skills that they need? Thank you.
The honourable member for Scarborough Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would like to thank my honourable colleague from Don Valley East for her question. With the changing economy, I think everyone needs to be equipped for the jobs of the future, and through Canada Training Credit, we will allow them to upgrade their skills so that they can have more successful jobs of the future.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Oshawa, maybe about a 30-second question and hopefully a 30-second answer.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. As everyone knows in the House, we had some significant job losses in Oshawa announced when the plant was announced that it would be closing. I'm looking through this budget, and the budget doesn't seem to be addressing any of the issues that manufacturers are asking for about the competitiveness of the Canadian economy, especially this new carbon tax, which many people still don't understand how high it's going to be. So I was wondering if she could point out in the budget if there's anything in there addressing the competitive disadvantage of Canadians, and if she can't point that out, could she at least let us know what the carbon tax is going to be by 2030, so companies that are making once-in-a-generation investments know what the costs are going to be in Canada?
The honourable member for Scarborough Centre in 30 seconds or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the honourable member for his question. Climate change is a reality, and I think it is today for our future generations. We have to accept that reality. Price on pollution, pollution cannot be free, and there has to be a price on pollution. And there will be a rebate through climate action incentive to all the families. For example, in Ontario, the family of 4 will be getting a climate action incentive of $307 for the price on pollution.
Resuming debate, reprise du débat. The honourable member for New Westminster, Burnaby.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I must say, I'm actually sad to rise today on Bill C-97 because this is really a symbol, I think, of what the last 4 years have been like under this Liberal government. The subtitle of this Budget Implementation Act is the Budget of Broken Promises. And I think it's very apt, Mr. Speaker, because for 4 years we have seen Liberals break promise after promise, commitment after commitment. Mr. Speaker, I remember back in 2015 when the Prime Minister was campaigning and Liberals were campaigning. And they promised a vast number of things. They promised that they would actually take care of the middle class. They promised that they would bring new dignity to Parliament, that they would stop the systematic bulldozing of legislation through Parliament, that they would be listening to opposition members of Parliament. And, Mr. Speaker, among many, many other broken promises, we could reference just for a moment pharmacare and democratic reform, they also promised never to bring in omnibus legislation. Now, the parliamentary secretary talks about ominous legislation, and he's quite right. Omnibus legislation does a profound disservice to this country, and it does a profound disservice to Canadians. Now, we only have to look at last year's omnibus bill, where they rammed through provisions designed to undermine what should be a principle of Canadian law. That if you break the law, whether it's bribery or any other criminal act, then you are subject to consequences. But what the Liberals slipped into the omnibus legislation that they promptly bulldozed through Parliament were provisions that allow for companies like SNC-Lavalin to get off scot-free if there is not an Attorney General willing to stand up to the Prime Minister and his people in the Prime Minister's office. And we've seen this whole sad SNC-Lavalin scandal play out as a result of that Liberal attempt to usurp parliamentary oversight. We raised questions about those provisions, but because the Liberals, with their majority government, bulldozed through the Budget Implementation Act last year, Canadians were not given the opportunity to really voice their displeasure about setting up what is a dual system in law, that if you're a rich corporation, you can break the law, and you don't have to worry the Prime Minister will let you off the hook. Well, what happens in this Budget Implementation Act? Well, first, of course, the promise about not bringing in omnibus legislation is broken yet again. It's something the Liberals have broken now 4 years in a row. 364 pages. But again, you see in the provisions of this Budget Implementation Act the poison pills. The legislation that, if it was to stand on its own, no Canadian would support its passage. And I'll reference what my colleague from Vancouver East raised yesterday in a point of order to you, Mr. Speaker. The provisions to undermine the ability of people fleeing persecution and extreme violence to apply for refugee status in Canada. Because what the Liberals have done, and extreme right-wing white nationalists are now complimenting the Liberals on the provisions that are deeply hidden in the Budget Implementation Act, is basically take away the right of refugees to cross the border because of what has happened under the Trump administration in the United States, and that persecution of minorities that we are seeing, sad persecution undertaken by Mr. Trump and his allies in Washington, is something that Canadians reject. However, Liberals have adopted and embraced. Instead of eliminating the Safe Third Country Agreement that would allow refugees to apply when they are being forced out of the United States or forced back to situations of extreme peril, what the Liberals have done is basically closed off that ability of those refugees to come to the border and apply for refugee status. Now, Mr. Speaker, I think all of us as human beings understand what these refugees are escaping. Profound violence and war, systematic sexual violence, a whole range of indignities and appalling situations that, fortunately, some people are able to escape. And they come to North America. They come to the United States, which used to be a beacon of freedom. In fact, Mr. Speaker, years ago, it was my grandfather who arrived at Ellis Island in the shadow of the Statue of Liberty to apply to come to the United States. And he went to the United States and worked for a number of years, and then went back to Europe and got his family and came to Canada. The United States used to be that beacon of welcome and freedom, typified by the Statue of Liberty. But under the Trump administration, those doors have now been cut, shut down, closed to those who are escaping persecution and violence. And Canada could have been that beacon of freedom by simply saying that the safe third country agreement no longer applies. Instead, what the Liberals have done by hiding within the provisions of the Budget Implementation Act is taken a kind of action that only white nationalists, those who have hatred in their hearts, express any approval for. It's appalling, Mr. Speaker, and it's just one of the symptoms of how far this Liberal government has fallen. Because the reality is, Mr. Speaker, for the vast majority of Canadians, this has been 4 very difficult years. Now, they were hoping after the years of Harper cutbacks and the massive handouts to the business sector, large profitable corporations, that the Liberals would keep their commitments and actually respond to people's needs. And the Budget Implementation Act, again, is a symbol of how far they have fallen from that goal that Canadians elected them to achieve. Now, if we look at what we've seen over the last few years, it's been massive corporate handouts, typified by the symbolic $12 million to Loblaws, one of Canada's richest corporations that my colleague from Rosemont and Petite Patrie just asked about. No response, of course, from the Liberals, as usual. But that $12 million pales in comparison with the tens of billions of dollars that this Liberal government has shoveled out the door to some of the most profitable and wealthy corporations in the country. Kinder Morgan. And they bought the pipeline, but not only did they buy it, they gave a bonus of billions of dollars, according to the Parliamentary Budgetary Office. So they bought an infrastructure and gave a bonus to Kinder Morgan executives. Such a shame. Billions of dollars that could have gone to housing, could have gone to pharmacare, could have gone to help the appalling situations in Indigenous communities. They didn't bat an eye. Billions of dollars out the door. $14 billion last fall that went out in the fall economic update, which was a gift to corporate executives on Bay Street. $14 billion out the door, no thought about whether or not it was in the public interest. And that alone doesn't even touch for a moment the intricate system of tax havens and tax loopholes Liberals and Conservatives have put in place over the years that leaves us with an estimated $20 to $30 billion each year going offshore. What is the result, Mr. Speaker? Well, for the corporate sector, it's the lowest effective tax rate in the industrialized world. 9% is the estimated tax rate paid by Canada's wealthiest and most profitable corporations, far below any other industrialized country, because we have a porous and profoundly unjust tax system. So, for corporate executives, it is the best of times. They're partying big because they know that all the resources are coming their way. But what is the missed opportunity in this Budget Implementation Act and in the budget itself is any meaningful act that actually makes a difference in people's lives. And Mr. Speaker, in this House, I've raised a number of times 2 individuals just because they are symptomatic of so many Canadians living in the same situation. I've spoken often about Jim, who is just off Parliament Hill on the bridge between the Chateau Laurier and Parliament Hill. And every day, Liberal ministers and Liberal MPs and the Prime Minister's limousine go right by Jim. He's sitting in his wheelchair and he's begging to get enough money so he can survive another month buying the medication that his doctor has prescribed for him because he needs it to stay alive. He needs it to be with his children and grandchildren. And because he's on a limited fixed income that barely pays for rent and food, he is obliged to beg for the $580 a month that keeps him in the medication, that keeps him in health, and keeps him alive. What a shameful symbol. Mr. Speaker. Unbelievable to me that for 4 years, Liberals have walked past him with hardly a regard, hardly a thought about Jim as they walk past with his sign saying, please contribute. Maybe some of them give a few dollars. I don't know. But I do know that if Liberals had come in 2015 with the intent to carry out their commitments, Jim would have pharmacare now. His medication would be paid for now. He would not need to beg to get the money to get through the month. If Liberals had kept their promises, somebody like Jim would no longer have to worry about that. He would be able to contribute as he wants to, spend his time volunteering in the community and spend time with his family. And his family's low income too. And he said very clearly, I have to do this. I don't want to burden my family. What a tragic choice to have to make for the entire family, imposed on Jim by this Liberal government and the Prime Minister. And I've talked before in this House as well about Heather. Mr. Speaker, Heather, who is struggling to find affordable housing, is worried about losing her apartment any month now because as rents skyrocket in the Lower Mainland, in the New Westminster Burnaby area, she shares a one-bedroom apartment with her mother and with her daughter, and they're struggling to get by. She is struggling to keep a roof over her head. And she is like so many others in the Lower Mainland, in Greater Toronto, right across this country. And of course, Mr. Speaker, in any Indigenous community, you see the absolutely deplorable state of housing in those communities. If Liberals 4 years ago had come with the intent of actually keeping their promises, what they would have done, something that the member for Burnaby South has been proposing in the entire NDP caucus, build affordable housing. Do like we did after the Second World War, when we had governments at that time who actually listened to the public. And when there were hundreds of thousands returning men and women in the service coming back to Canada, what the federal government did at that time was build not 1 or 10 or 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 units. Over 3 years, Mr. Speaker, they built 300,000 affordable homes for those returning men and women in the service who are coming back to Canada. Because we knew at that time, Canadians knew, and Canadians still know, that there's an important responsibility that comes with power. And at that time, after the Second World War, that government got it right. One of those homes is the home that my wife and I live at on Glover Avenue in Westminster. And it's still a very good home today. 300,000 units. Well, if Liberals had actually wanted to keep the commitments that they made back in 2015, they would have built hundreds of thousands of units like we did after the Second World War, and people like Heather would be safe in affordable housing. They wouldn't be worried about whether they'd still have their apartment in a month or in 2 months or in 3 months. If the government had done the right thing, housing would be provided now to every Canadian, and every Canadian would have a roof over their head, and every Canadian would feel safe in their housing. But they didn't do any of that, Mr. Speaker. They made a commitment in the Budget Act to do something eventually if they're re-elected. Same with pharmacare. Oh, we'll fill in some of the holes after we are re-elected. A callous disregard for what Canadians are living through. We've seen the figures, Mr. Speaker. Things are getting worse, not better. I mean, Liberals stand up in this House and say everything is great. Excuse me, when the statistics come out, as they did a few weeks ago, that 46% of Canadians are $200 away in any given month from not being able to pay their expenses. Think about that for a moment. Half the Canadian population, $200 bill, a car repair, perhaps something they have to contribute at school, a health problem, and goodness knows they don't have access to pharmacare. So having to pay for medication, a $200 margin is all they have, whether they go even more deeply in debt or not. And Mr. Speaker, Canada now has, after 20, 30 years of Conservative and Liberal governments, the worst record in the industrialized world for the level of family debt. All of this splurging on Bay Street, these massive tax handouts that are given left, right, and center have left a decimated middle class. It is not only the worst family debt crisis in our nation's history, it's the worst family debt crisis in any industrialized nation's history. Canadians are struggling under massive levels of family debt. They're trying to pay for their homes, and they're having to borrow to stay in their homes. They're trying to pay for school or trying to pay for their children to go to university or college. and they're struggling and going further into debt. They're going into debt to pay for their medication. They're going into debt for a wide variety of basic needs that are no longer met by our federal government in any way, shape, or form. Now, Mr. Speaker, what we have with this Budget Implementation Act is a powerful symbol of 4 years of inaction by this Liberal government. 4 years of betrayal and 4 years of broken promises. And Mr. Speaker, I think on October 21st, Canadians will judge the Liberals on those broken promises. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
We'll interrupt now for a question period, but the honourable member for New Westminster Burnaby will have 3 minutes and 50 seconds coming to him when we return, and we'll take up the questions then. Statements by members. Déclaration de député. The honourable member for Regina Louvain.
Mr. Speaker, last week we lost one of Saskatchewan's great pioneers for Medicare. Betsy Bury served in the Royal Canadian Air Force in World War II before becoming active in the Cooperative Commonwealth Federation. She was a founding member of the Saskatoon Community Clinic, which continued to provide health care after doctors withdrew their services in opposition to the CCF government's Medicare plan. She was predeceased by her husband, John Bury, one of the doctors from the British National Health Service who came to Saskatchewan in support of Medicare. While the Burys and other Saskatchewan people succeeded in bringing public health care to Canada, their work remains incomplete. The best tribute we can pay them is to continue building our public system to include prescription drugs, dental care, and all health services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, everyone knows someone that has struggled with fertility issues, yet speaking about infertility is still quite taboo in our society. Starting later this month, Canadians will have an opportunity to highlight the need to break the stigma and share their story with others during Canadian Infertility Awareness Week. Thank you to Fertility Matters, the national organization that empowers Canadians to help reach their reproductive health goals for their leadership and bringing awareness to this important issue. En tant que parent du
As sponsor of Bill C-404, an act to amend the Assisted Human Reproduction Act to help more Canadians have their own child, I believe that we must devote more attention to this conversation.
Mr. Speaker, I ask my colleagues to join me in encouraging all Canadians who have experienced difficulty in building their families to share their stories and help remove the stigma surrounding their struggles. Thank you.
The honourable member for Markham Unionville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. I want to take a moment today to express my best wishes to everyone in Canada and around the world celebrating Baisakhi. Baisakhi is the most celebrated day in the Sikh faith. We honor this creation of Khalsa by spending quality time with family and friends. This year also marked the 100th anniversary of the Amritsar massacre. Mr. Speaker, the massacre of an estimated 1,000 civilians at Jallianwala Bagh, a public garden where they had gathered for a peaceful protest on April 13, 1919, a very devastating day. I also want to take this opportunity to invite all my colleagues and friends to a Baisakhi celebration here on Parliament Hill on May 12th. I hope to see you all there. I wish everyone a safe and joyful holiday. Baisakhi diyan lakh lakh badaiyan. Happy Baisakhi. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well, member for Guelph.
Mr. Speaker, with the start of Christian Holy Week upon us, I'd like to first recognize Monsignor Dennis Noon, who recently had announced his plans to retire after serving as pastor of the Basilica of Our Lady Immaculate for 16 years. The entire Christian community in Guelph and across Canada continues to do incredible work to build up our communities. Each Sunday after attending church at my home parish of Holy Rosary, I visit another faith community in my riding. I'm always impressed with the volunteers supporting vulnerable people, providing meals, clothing, or housing, welcoming refugees, looking out for seniors, providing summer camps for our children and our youth to gain work experience experience. Each faith community has its own personality, but its foundation is always centered on a vision to do good work and to bring people together. At this time of year, Christians reflect on where they are on their faith journey and how they can do better in the year ahead, following the call to love one another. In that same spirit, Mr. Speaker, I want to wish Guelphites and Canadians a very happy Easter.
The Honourable Member for Longueuil-Saint-Hubert. Today, students are demonstrating again in Montreal in Parc Jean-Masse. What are they asking for? They're asking us to stop focusing on unimportant matters and to focus on the most important one, global warming. They've asked us to stop squabbling. They're asking us to take a stand, to work together, to finally agree that we are going to meet our greenhouse gas emissions targets. That's what they expect of us. The NDP, the Bloc, the Green Party, we've come together to ask the leaders of the other two parties to sit down with us to agree on the fact that we will meet our greenhouse gas targets, reduction targets. We have international commitments in this regard. We need to respect them. This is what the students are asking for. This is our responsibility here to agree to the fact that it's not if we're going to meet these targets, but how we are going to do so in the next campaign. Take a stand for your children.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians expect their government to take aggressive action on climate change. A new report indicates Canada is warming at twice the global rate. As climate change escalates, we face strong and more unpredictable weather events. Deadly wildfires have devastated communities in British Columbia, Alberta, south of us in California, and across the Pacific in China. Unprecedented drought have struck Africa and the Middle East. Just recently, massive flooding has taken over 70 lives in Golestan, Fars, Khuzestan, and Lorestan provinces in Iran. An international effort is currently underway to provide relief to those affected by this ongoing crisis. As well, I encourage everyone to donate to Canadian Red Cross to support their important life-saving work. We have a plan to address climate change, Mr. Speaker. We are putting a price on pollution, investing in green technology, and working with the international community to face one of the greatest challenges of our time. Canada is doing its part. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Beauport, Côte-de-Beaupré, Île d'Orléans, Charlevoix-Beauport. Today, I rise to pay tribute to a woman who taught me everything I know about life, people, selflessness, a tiny woman, but an exceptionally great one, my mother. Last December, on the eve of her 88th birthday, she closed her eyes on the winter as it raged, tired of fighting her memory loss. Watching someone we love dearly lose bits and pieces of their memory is very difficult. Alzheimer's is incomprehensible. She for years was my guiding light. She became a shadow of herself. I then had to become her guide and her light. The mother-daughter times we shared over the years will forever remain in my memory. Despite her disease, all of those moments are unique for me. Mom, you went to join your man, your dancer, your friend, your lover, my father, Justin. Soar, my angel, soar. The Honourable Member for Saint-Jean. Agriculture, as well as the men and women behind our food security, are at the heart of what defines Canada and have been since its creation. Mr. Normand Gagnon, a grain farmer in the riding of Saint-Jean, received the Coup de Chapeau Prize at the AgriStar Gala on April 8th. This award is more than well-deserved. It reflects the commitment and support provided by Mr. Gagnon and his spouse, Louise. Collaborators, over a long period of time, Normand and I worked together on an ethanol plant in Quebec. Defending and promoting farming are, for Normand, what have been at the heart of his commitment over the past 40 years. Congratulations, Normand, for this tribute. Continue to passionately defend our noble profession. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
L'honorable député de La Prairie.
The honourable member for La Prairie. The hockey playoffs are on, and I couldn't not talk about the Les Sages Hockey League on the South Shore that's holding the 16th annual tournament in the Gaetan Boucher Sports Centre in Saint-Hubert. This league is very specific and unique. It's made up of players who are 70 years of age and older. Several players are, in fact, 80, and the oldest is 92. And you did hear me correctly, Mr. Speaker, 92. This year, no fewer than 24 teams, primarily from Ontario and Quebec, are participating in the 16th edition. It's a much sought-after tournament and was a success once again. I'd like to use my opportunity in the House to honor all these men to remain young, active, and in good health. They've decided to live their passion, playing hockey, and I hope that they will continue to do so for many years to come.
Melville.
Even as Africa, Asia, and the Middle East are intensifying persecution against Christians, our government and media stay mostly silent. In this past year alone, 4,136 Christians were killed for their faith, 2,625 detained without trial, and 1,266 places of worship attacked. We must not take for granted the religious freedoms that our democracy provides. As Christians celebrate this Easter, we remember when Christ was crucified. He did what none of us could do. He paid the price for our sins. Then he rose from the dead to stand in the gap between our personal inability to save ourselves and our holy, just, and loving God. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him will not perish, but have eternal life. It is by grace that you have been saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It's a gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. Easter blessings today to all Christians that will be celebrating all over the world.
The honourable member for London West.
Our government understands that no relationship is more important than the one we have with Indigenous peoples. To start rebuilding this relationship, we made clear our commitment to implementing the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's recommendations. As part of the report, there was a call to action for greater support to Indigenous sport. That's why just yesterday, the Minister of Science and Sport was in St. Catharines to announce that our government will be providing $1.7 million to add box lacrosse to the 2021 Canada Summer Games taking place in Niagara. Lacrosse is a sport that is deeply ingrained in the culture and tradition of the Indigenous people. As many in this House know, adding lacrosse to these games is a major milestone, especially considering it's also our national summer sport. I can't wait to see lacrosse at the 2021 Canada Summer Games. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Chantilly-La Petite Nation. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to highlight the exceptional record of a man who hails from Thurso, located in my magnificent riding of Argenteuil-La Petite Nation. I'm referring to the Flower, Mr. Guy Lafleur, a true hockey legend. He was recently elected best player in the history of the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League at the Gala des Rondelles d'Or in Quebec City. And when he played for the team, he was exceptional with the Remparts de Québec. He scored totaled 379 points, including 233 goals, and led the team to winning the Memorial Cup in 1971. And that's in addition to his exceptional record as a hockey star. He is a model of perseverance and passion for all young athletes in Quebec. Guy.
Honourable member for Sarnia-Lambton.
People in my riding have been waiting 16 months for the Liberal government to do something to restore the border crossing at Sombra. We need $2 million for that. And we've been waiting 4 years for the government to find $6 million to fund a project which will create 3,000 well-paying jobs in my community. We've waited 4 years for the government to address high-speed internet gaps in my riding. So you can imagine my outrage when I find out the Environment Minister gave $12 million taxpayer dollars to Loblaws, a company that made a $3 billion profit last year. While small businesses like JDW Trucking in Sarnia and many other Canadians are struggling to pay this liberal carbon tax, the Environment Minister is taking from the poor to give to the rich. Instead of fridges for the wealthy, how about jobs and border crossings in Sarnia-Lambton?
The Honourable Member for Scarborough Centre.
Mr. Speaker, the Canadian Cancer Society has launched its annual Daffodil campaign to raise funds to support its life-changing programs, groundbreaking research, and important advocacy efforts as we all work towards the goal of eradicating cancer. This year's campaign in particular meaningful to me as a cancer survivor. Cancer can strike us or a loved one at any time and without warning. Young or old, whatever your race or gender, no matter how active and healthy you are, cancer does not discriminate. I have seen firsthand the impact a cancer diagnosis has not only on the patients, but on their family, their colleagues, and their community. The support organizations such as the Canadian Cancer Society provide is invaluable. I encourage my colleagues and all Canadians to support the efforts of the Canadian Cancer Society and wear their daffodil with pride. Together, we can make cancer history.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. I'm happy to highlight the success of the Entrepreneur Project. Its awards ceremony was March 7th. Gilles Sigouin joined forces with the Centre de Femmes Ainsi Soit-Elle, the Chamber of Commerce and Industry in Chambly, as well as Luma Studio, to organize this competition to showcase women entrepreneurs. Congratulations to the winners.
Sylvie Racine, Julia Girard-Desbiens, Karine Thibault, Louise et Nancy Lasselle, Georgette Allary, Annick Cormier et Sandrine Millant.
We know that the power imbalance between men and women contributes to inequalities as well, unfortunately, as to violence and aggression. For these reasons, I'm very proud to support and shed light on these women in business. A special thanks to José Daigle, not only for the success of this competition, but all of the work she does at the Centre Ainsi Soit-Elle. Mr. Speaker, if you're in Chambly at Délire et Délices, try the Ainsi Soit-Elle beer. It's not only good, but the profits go to the Women's Centre. Congratulations to all and to all organizers. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Kitchener-Conestoga.
Mr. Speaker, this past Sunday I was honored to attend the Armenian Genocide Commemoration in Cambridge. Between 1915 and 1923, millions of Armenians were subjected to unspeakable suffering, and approximately 1.5 million Armenians died at the hands of the Ottoman Empire. Although 104 years have passed, the horror of the Armenian genocide has not diminished. On April 24, thousands of Armenians will gather in Yerevan to remember and to commemorate the lives lost. I've had the privilege of meeting Canadians of Armenian descent who contribute so much to my home community of the Waterloo region and to this great country. I look forward to joining fellow Canadians at the Armenian Genocide Commemoration in North York later this month. Remembering the Armenian genocide should motivate us all to continue bridge-building initiatives to do everything in our power to ensure that such a terrible tragedy never happens again. We will remember.
The Honourable Member for Longueuil-Charles-Lemoine. Mr. Speaker, the 16th edition of the Lassonde Tyler Hockey Tournament is wrapping up today at the Gaétan Boucher Sports Centre in my riding of Longueuil-Charles-Lemoine. This is a unique tournament in North America because it's exclusively reserved for seniors 70 years of age and older. The Les Sages de la Rive-Sud Hockey League organizes this sporting event every year, and this year it includes 24 teams, including 4 teams of players over 80.
The tournament is to enable seniors 70 years of age and older to play a sport they enjoy, stay active and healthy, and develop new friendships. This year's event hosts teams from across Quebec and Ontario. The profits generated will go to supporting the Alzheimer's Society of the South Shore. Congratulations to the organizers and participants of the tournament, and long life to the Les Sages de la Rive-Sud Hockey League. Thank you.
Happy birthday, madame.
Oral questions. Question orale. The Honourable Member for Carleton.
Teddy Roosevelt said, "Speak softly and carry a big stick and you will go far." The Prime Minister making big, bold threats of a lawsuit and then hiding from following through. He is roaring loudly, and carrying a small twig. Now, I'm announcing today on behalf of the Leader of the Opposition, he is setting a deadline for the Prime Minister to follow through on his threat. Monday at midnight. Will they meet the deadline, or will the Prime Minister just run for cover?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, let me just share a little bit of history. The Minister of Innovation had put the Leader of the Official Opposition on notice in December because he had used words that were not judicious and should not have been used. He used them in the House. We challenged him to use them outside the House. He tried it outside the House, was served notice, and all of a sudden, like magic, those tweets disappeared. Those online press releases disappeared. Mr. Speaker, this happened in February, and now in March, the Prime Minister served him notice. And like magic, those tweets disappeared.
Honourable Member for Carleton.
The letter of threat the Prime Minister sent the official opposition included a bunch of different objectionable claims that he said the Conservative leader had made. So the Conservative leader took the same letter, walked outside, and repeated every single allegation. The Prime Minister, if he doesn't believe that the Leader of the Opposition was telling the truth, could take action, but he has to do so quickly under the principle of libel law that you have to move as soon as reasonably possible. So when will he live up to his bold threats, or will he simply back down and hide?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
In December, the Leader of the Official Opposition deleted tweets, retracted messaging. In February, the Leader of the Official Opposition deleted tweets, retracted messaging. In March, the Leader of the Official Opposition deleted tweets, retracted messaging. They change their messaging and then they go outside. But most recently, Mr. Speaker, because the Conservatives have a history of misleading Canadians, they wanted to have a fundraiser. They wanted a private fundraiser to talk about the privatization of healthcare. You know what they did, Mr. Speaker? They have now changed the parameters of that fundraiser. Maybe they'll delete it entirely. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Carleton.
They really want to talk about health care and fundraisers? This from a party whose leader had a $1,500 a plate fundraiser and threw out of the room to cackles of laughter an Aboriginal protester angry about the mercury poisoning that occurred in a First Nations community. We will take no lessons from this Prime Minister on health care and fundraisers. Instead of political attacks and hypocrisy, why won't they stand up behind their words and follow?
Honourable Member for Louis.
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent.
The Honourable Government House Leader is going to want to respond to that.
I know you couldn't find the question in there, but that is what they mislead Canadians and call a question. But, Mr. Speaker, it's important because it's a very important matter, and the Prime Minister did apologize and accept responsibility. But what's more important, actually, when it comes to that issue, Mr. Speaker, is that when it comes to the fundraisers that we hold, they are in public. The media is present. Anyone who lobbies the Prime Minister is not able to attend because we have even stricter rules when it comes to fundraising. And we had to bring the Conservatives kicking and screaming along because when it came to the fundraiser, the future finance dream minister wanted to have.
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker, it's strange to see the Liberal Party, who for the last 2 months has been unable to manage this crisis, and then to see the Prime Minister have this idea. He decided to try to sue the Leader of the Official Opposition. But, Mr. Speaker, not only did our leader not move at all, he even repeated and republished exactly what he had said before. So now we're just waiting for the trial. Will the Prime Minister do what he said, or on the contrary, will he do what he normally does and just have a lot of empty rhetoric? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, we have a lot to say. And that is exactly why we have an economy that is working today. We know that Canadians are better off today than there were under the 10 years of the Stephen Harper government. But the member across the way is asking questions, even though he knows very well that the Leader of the Opposition changed the words that he used. But before doing that, Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition deleted the statements that he had made because he knew that he was continuing to mislead Canadians, and that is unacceptable. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint-Laurent. What's unacceptable, Mr. Speaker, is a Prime Minister who shows contempt to Canadians by doing one thing and saying another. 2 months ago, when the Globe and Mail broke the story of this scandal, the Prime Minister said the very next day, that's totally false. There have been 4 resignations since then. Another thing the Prime Minister said is, I was never informed of any danger of political interference. He said that until 2 weeks ago in this House, he admitted that in fact he had been informed on September 17th. Mr. Speaker, will the Prime Minister carry out his threat of legal action, and if so, when? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, we know that Canadians need to hear the truth. That's exactly why the Prime Minister waived solicitor-client privilege and cabinet confidence, and that's exactly why all of the facts are now public. But the Conservatives continue to mislead Canadians, and that's unacceptable. Now, the member across the way is doing the same. He is following in the footsteps of his leader. But I think we need to show some respect for Canadians. We know that they've heard the truth. All of the facts are public, and Canadians can make their choice. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for New Westminster, Burnaby.
Canadians are increasingly worried about the political interference by this Prime Minister and his office in our independent justice system. But instead of reassuring them, this Liberal government continues to try to cover up their wrongdoing and scandal. Now, Canadians know there was inappropriate pressure on our justice system for their rich Liberal friends. The OECD's anti-bribery unit is also paying attention. They put Canada on notice in a letter to the NDP that they're watching what the Liberals are doing. So will Liberals just do what's right, reassure the OECD and Canadians, and call a public inquiry now?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, in March, the Minister spoke with the chair of the OECD Working Group, and she confirmed to him that we are fully committed to cooperating with the good work that they do. Obviously, we fully support the OECD's work in all such endeavours, and Canada is a strong supporter of the rules-based international order, including the OECD, which is a flagship organization. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Sherbrooke. Mr. Speaker, if they respected the OECD, they wouldn't have shut down the Justice Committee investigation. Now, the Liberals are trying to change the channel on their interference scandal, but people still want to know the whole truth about the SNC-Lavalin scandal. The government seems to have 2 sets of rules, one for their buddies and one for everyone else. The cosy relationship between Loblaws and the Liberals is just the latest example of how the Liberal team really works and who they work for. This game has gone on long enough. People have a right to transparency. Will the government finally launch a public inquiry into interference allegations before the next election?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
In March, the Prime Minister talked to the OECD Working Group and confirmed that we are ready to fully cooperate with the excellent work of their team and that we fully support the OECD's work. Canada is a fervent defender of the international rules-based international order, including the OECD. The Honourable Member for Sherbrooke. Mr. Speaker, we learned this week that the Minister of Finance is working very closely with big Canadian banks. This is another example of the way that Liberal cronies get special treatment. This Liberal government promised more transparency. They promised they would do politics differently. And they also promised real measures to fight climate change. But what are those measures? Apparently $12 million to one of the richest organizations in this country. They gave $12 million to Loblaws, a lovely gift from the Prime Minister. When will the Liberals finally focus on real priorities instead of the priorities of the rich and privileged? The Honourable Minister for the Environment. Mr. Speaker, I'm always happy to talk about what we're doing to fight climate change. We're putting a price on pollution. We are eliminating, phasing out carbon. We are investing in green technology. And the subject that the member is talking about, he should know that we are investing 25% of that investment to reduce 50,000 cars a year from the road. I think that's a good investment, and we all need to work together to fight climate change. That includes provinces, companies, cities and everyone.
Westminster Burnaby.
Well, the Environment Minister should also actually ask Canadians whether they think it's a good idea to give $12 million to a company that made nearly $1 billion in profits last year, all while refusing to pay its staff a fair wage. Now, people across the country are desperate for this government to act on climate change, but instead they see Liberals padding Loblaw's profits. Now, 2 Loblaw's lobbyists were at a Liberal Cash for Access fundraiser with the Prime Minister and the Environment Minister's senior staff. So Canadians want to know, is that why Loblaw's got this sweetheart deal?
Honourable Minister of the Environment.
No, the reason Loblaw got this deal was because there was an open tender process that was open to businesses, communities, big businesses, small businesses, Indigenous peoples. 54 winners. They were based on emission reductions. In this case, in this open, transparent process run by public servants, the winner, we are only putting up 1/4 of the amount of the $48 million, $50,000 reduction emissions. It's like 50,000 vehicles off the road. We should all support that. We should all be looking to work together to tackle climate change.
The Honourable Member for Calgary, Rocky Ridge.
Well, Mr. Speaker, everybody knows that the Prime Minister has been misleading Canadians now for over 2 months. He said that the SNC story was false, that no one raised concerns, that he did it for jobs, and yet each one of these statements is a proven falsehood. Then, he foolishly tried to bully the opposition leader into silence by threatening to sue. But the opposition leader has now called this ridiculous bluff. It's the Prime Minister's move. When will we see him in court?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, it's important that Canadians know, and I guess members should also be informed, that when people say things that they should not say, there is consequences to that. And what happened is that the leader of the official opposition is using terminologies and making accusations that are inappropriate. And so what we did, Mr. Speaker, is that we won't stand idly by, and Canadians can have confidence. We put him on notice. And really quickly after he received notice, he deleted those tweets. He took a step back from his messaging and now reiterates his new messaging that I guess we helped him discover. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For Sarnia Lambton.
Well, Mr. Speaker, our leader has repeated exactly the words that he said in the first place. It's the Prime Minister that has been misleading Canadians. He told them the SNC story was false, and that's not true. Then he said no one raised concerns. Not true. Then he said he did it for jobs. The company says that's not true. The Prime Minister's threat to sue the leader of the opposition is clearly a bluff. If he truly believes he has a case, when will we see him in court?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, they say repetition works, and when it comes to hearing the answer, obviously repetition does not work. So let me remind the honourable member that's more focused on privatizing health care than she is focusing on making sure that we have a universal healthcare system that actually works for all Canadians. That's something that Canadians pride themselves in, but that is not the focus of the dreamy future Minister of Health, as she likes to refer to herself as. So I will remind her that all facts are now public. The Justice Committee meetings took place in public. They took place in public so that witnesses could appear, and the Prime Minister ensured that solicitor-client privilege as well as cabinet confidence was waived.
The
Honourable Member for Montmagny-Lise-Kamouraska, Rivière-du-Loup. Mr. Speaker, it's the Prime Minister himself who misled Canadians. He said that the SNC-Lavalin story was false, but obviously that wasn't true. Then, he said that no one had raised concerns with him. That was also untrue. If he really believes that the truth is defamatory to him, when are we going to see him in court, Mr. Speaker? When? The Honourable Government House Leader. Once again, Mr. Speaker, all of the facts about this subject are public because the Prime Minister waived solicitor-client privilege and cabinet confidence. Members who sit on the Justice Committee looked at this issue for 5 weeks, they studied it, and they decided themselves on the outcome. Now, Canadians will know everything about the facts because they're all public. We will always call out the Conservatives if they mislead Canadians, because that's not how we should be doing things in this place. The The Honourable Member for Beauport, Côte de Beaupré, Île d'Orléans, Charlevoix. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, obviously, misleading Canadians isn't what people should be doing, but that's exactly what the Liberal government has been doing from the very beginning of this scandal. The Prime Minister put our leader on notice. Our leader repeated word for word what he said outside this House. Every time that we've asked questions about SNC-Lavalin, the Prime Minister changes his story. So, will he act on this?
L'honorable leader du gouvernement.
The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, the member across the way forgot a very little detail, which is that the Prime Minister sent a letter, put the Leader of the Opposition on notice, because he has a history of misleading Canadians. We don't think that this is the way things should be done. So the Prime Minister sent a letter to the Leader of the Opposition, and then the Leader of the Opposition must have read the letter, and then deleted his online statements and deleted the tweets. I think that he and his team then changed the words that were used, and now those are the words he's repeating.
Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has been misleading Canadians for months now. That's nothing new for this Prime Minister with his track record of 4 ethical breaches. Now he has the audacity to threaten the opposition leader with a lawsuit for speaking the truth. But the opposition leader won't be intimidated. When will the Prime Minister put his money where his mouth is and meet the opposition leader in court?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, we should have confidence in our institutions and the court of law, and no one should be intimidated because we know that the rule of law in Canada is intact. And that's exactly why when the Leader of the Official Opposition received a notice from the Prime Minister, he quickly erased his tweets, he erased his online statements, and then he chose better words. And that probably was the right thing to do, and now they continue to repeat those words. But, Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives have a history of misleading Canadians. This is now new terminology that they are echoing from us, and they did it in December, they did it in February, now they just did it in March. But most recently, they sent out this publicly funded tax booklet, and they forgot to talk about the climate action incentive, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes.
Mr. Speaker, we know the Liberals are obsessed with Twitter. They've started diplomatic feuds on Twitter. They've damaged the integrity of our immigration system on Twitter. They've even praised dictators on Twitter. But this isn't about Twitter. This is about the opposition leader's March 29th statement. That's why he repeated every word from that statement inside and outside the chamber. So when will the Prime Minister meet the opposition leader in court, or should I just check his Twitter?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, we know that members who want to be in the Conservatives benches have to follow their leader. They're not allowed to speak out of turn. So I encourage him to follow his leader on Twitter so that he can maintain that speed. But more importantly, Mr. Speaker, what is clear is that Conservatives are focused on...
Order. The Honourable Member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes asked a question, and the Honourable Government House Leader was answering it, and I'm having a hard time hearing the answer. I'm sure the Honourable Member is as well, so I want to ask everyone to maybe just show a little politeness. I notice a lot of students watching today, and we want to set an example for them. We don't want to act out of line. The Honourable Government House Leader has 18 seconds left.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I will just finish by saying that the Conservatives will remain focused on us, but we will remain focused on Canadians because that's exactly who we are here to serve. And the member who occupied that seat prior to that member was actually a member of the National Security Committee of Parliamentarians, and we just actually tabled the report for the first time. It was dedicated to him.
The Honourable Member for Desnete, Mississippi, Churchill River.
Survivors of the Isle of Cross and Timber Bay boarding schools are seeking justice from this government. When they were in opposition, the Liberals wanted justice for Métis survivors from northern Saskatchewan, but they did nothing to provide compensation or justice since they formed government. Métis people and survivors of boarding schools don't want to wait for another election to get justice. Will the Liberals commit today to do the right thing for survivors from the Isle of Cross in Timber Bay boarding schools?
Come on.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the member opposite for her advocacy, her relentless advocacy in this matter, as well as her colleague from Abitibi, Nunavik, James Bay EU. This is obviously a matter that is under advisement with the department. It is a matter that we take very seriously, and I hope to come back to the House with further clarification on the matter. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Desnete, Mississippi, Churchill River.
Mr. Speaker, we are just weeks away from Kashechewan First Nations annual evacuation. The dike wall could fail, causing catastrophic damage to the community. This community has been waiting for funding for relocation to higher ground for years. The Liberal budget gave nothing to the community, and they're getting desperate. This is not a nation-to-nation relationship. When will the Liberals stop playing games with the lives of Kashechewan's people and fund their relocation?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Indigenous Services.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the Honourable Member for her question. Our government recognizes the threat of flooding during the spring breakup is an ongoing reality for the First Nation of Kashechewan. Our commitment to a long-term relocation plan has not wavered, it has not changed. In the meantime, we've made significant progress on priorities such as the new modular school, which will be installed in September of this year. We are currently working with the First Nation to monitor the threat of flooding, to conduct preliminary flood mitigation, and prepare a smooth transition to the host communities.
Member for York Simcoe.
Here. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has threatened to sue the Leader of the Opposition. His lawyer objects to her claim that the Clerk of the Privy Council pressured her, the former Attorney General, and made it clear that her job was on the line. Canadians heard the Clerk of the Privy Council in his own words. They know this statement to be true. When will the Prime Minister allow this court case to begin so the truth can be revealed?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I have answered that question now on numerous occasions, and I do believe that one day we will actually be in this House debating policies that actually have impacts on Canadians. And so I can actually share that when it comes to our plan, we have seen 950,000 jobs created by Canadians. We know that over 800,000 children have been lifted out of poverty. We know almost 300,000 children have been lifted out of poverty because of the Canada Child tax-free benefit, measures that the Conservatives continue to vote against. We know that the Conservatives have no plan for the environment. We know the Conservatives have no plan for the environment. The only plan they have is to mislead Canadians, and that really shouldn't be the competition. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Markham Unionville.
Mr. Speaker, for months the Prime Minister has been trying to keep the truth from Canadians. And now he is threatening lawsuit, try to silence his opponents. It won't work. Canadians want the Prime Minister to present his evidence in the court of law. So when will the Prime Minister follow through on his threat? Or is he just talk, no walk?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
So, once again, I've answered that question, but I think what Canadians, what they are prioritizing, or many of them, is it's the economy and the environment. So when it comes to the economy, we know that we have one of the fastest growing economies in the G7, and that's pretty impressive because that means more Canadians are working today than they were in my lifetime. And when it comes to our climate plan, because we know that climate change is real, we actually want to transition to a cleaner, greener economy by making cleaner, greener choices more affordable. And that's why we have the Climate Action Incentive Payment. But that member and his party choose to mislead Canadians by not reminding Canadians that...
L'honorable député. The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, on March 29th, our leader made an official statement through a press release saying that the Prime Minister led a political interference campaign, that he personally gave orders, and that he denied the truth, and that therefore the Prime Minister had lost the moral authority to govern. Our leader maintains everything that he said in that statement. Mr. Speaker, my question is simple. Will the Prime Minister finally show some courage and do what he said he would do and commence proceedings so that we can hear the whole truth before the courts?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, the member across the way knows well that I've already answered this question. And instead of asking the same question again, I would encourage the member to focus on policies. Policies which will have a real impact on Canadians. The Conservatives are doing everything they can to block a budget that includes important measures for Canadians, such as lower interest rates for student loans, so that Canadians can keep more of their money and more help for first-time homebuyers.
For Saskatoon, Grasswood.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's becoming abundantly clear that the thing the Prime Minister fears most is telling the truth. Yes, in open court, he can't shut down the hearings, and he can't threaten the witnesses. Will he commit today, Mr. Speaker, to immediately file his lawsuit and testify in open court about what he did to politically interfere in a criminal trial?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, it's interesting that the member who's from the province of Saskatchewan would rise, and he knows very well that I've answered that question. But Saskatchewan is actually one of the provinces that don't have a provincial climate plan. So to ensure that we can transition to a cleaner, greener economy, the federal government actually has put forward a climate action incentive payment. And families within Saskatchewan actually will be receiving over $600 when they file their taxes this year. And that's actually more than, it will benefit more. 80% of families will actually spend less when it comes to making cleaner, greener choices, because we want to ensure that they make cleaner, greener choices and that they are affordable. So I encourage
the Honourable Member for Vancouver Kingsway.
Mr. Speaker, according to breast cancer experts, thousands of Canadian women will die due to this government's new breast cancer screening guidelines. The new guidelines ignore expert advice, disregard the importance of mammograms for women in their 40s, and advise against self-exams. They overlook the benefits of early detection, ignore current data, and are silent on the risks of breast density. Given these grave concerns, will the Liberals halt these guidelines, advise physicians not to follow them, and launch a review under the direction of subject matter experts?
Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague for his question. Protecting the health and safety of all Canadians is my top priority. The Canadian Task Force on Preventative Health Care is an independent, arm's-length panel of 15 experts to develop clinical practical guidelines. While the government provided support to the Task Force Breast Cancer Screening Work Group, its decision was totally done independently. As such, these are not official government guidelines. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie. Mr. Speaker, steel workers and their families have been having a really rough time lately. They are facing great uncertainty as temporary protection measures are set to expire on April 27th. The Liberals are messing around and are reluctant to keep these safeguards to protect our jobs and avoid the flooding of the market. Instead, they're gifting millions to the Weston family. Time is running out. Steel workers can no longer wait. Mr. Speaker, instead of helping big banks and rich corporations, can the Liberal government finally help out workers and real people? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We are always going to protect Canadians and the interests of our workers. And the unjust tariffs imposed by the U.S., we've established many measures to compensate them, and we're going to continue to work with the steel and aluminum workers to support them through this crisis until these unjust and illegal tariffs are removed. Thank you.
Newmarket.
Mr. Speaker, we know that our country's continued prosperity depends on innovative, hard-working Canadian companies and their ability to access new markets. Increased trade improves overall productivity and creates good-paying jobs for all Canadians. Can the Minister of International Trade Diversification please let the House know what steps are being taken to increase trade opportunities for Canadians from coast to coast to coast.
Well, Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to thank my colleague from Newmarket Aurora and for the question and for his leadership at the International Trade Committee. Mr. Speaker, consecutive governments talked about trade diversification, but it was only our government that made that a reality. Under our government, we signed and ratified CETA and CPTPP. That is 1.5 billion new customers for our businesses, Mr. Speaker. This week, the Minister announced new measures to help SMEs trade, grow, and create jobs. Mr. Speaker, we're aiming to grow our global exports by 50% by 2025.
The honourable for Mégantic-L'Érable. And they won't be able to do so because instead of being at home in their fields, working for the next season, canola farmers are here in Ottawa, sounding the alarm. China's no longer buying our canola. Saudi Arabia is no longer buying our barley. Italy's snubbing our durum wheat. India is putting tariffs on pulses. The farmers are paying the price for the Prime Minister's failures. We've asked for emergency debate 8 times on this, and Liberals have refused it 8 times. The government needs to be more engaged, creative, and aggressive in defending Canadian grains and oilseeds, according to the industry. When will the government do this? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Agriculture. We understand the concerns of canola farmers. For the past month and a half, the Minister has met with many farmers and industry representatives here in Ottawa, in Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Canadian representatives are in talks with our Chinese colleagues to find a science-based solution. We sent a letter to China asking to send a delegation of high experts, and we're going to continue to defend the industry of canola. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Moose Mountain.
Mr. Speaker, when it comes to the canola crisis, it is clear that the Prime Minister is letting China call the shots. His weak leadership and inaction is hurting Canadian farmers. One of my farmers has 400,000 bushels of canola in the bin, and it has lost $600,000 in value in the past few weeks. As the price of canola is driven down, farmers have no certainty as what they should plant in the future. This is a crisis. When will the Prime Minister actually stand up for our canola farmers?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. As I've already said, we understand the concerns of canola producers. Our government has established a working group with representatives from the industry and provincial partners. We sent a letter to China asking for the support of a delegation of experts. We're going to continue to defend the canola industry and to defend our very rigorous inspection system, which is one of the best in the world. The opposition party voted against the agricultural budget, I'd like to note.
River Parkland.
Mr. Speaker, the time for working groups and letters is over. The canola crisis continues with farmers across Canada paying for the Liberals' mistakes. Now, the Minister of Agriculture says she's seized with the issue, that this requires a scientific solution. Let's call a spade a spade. The Chinese do not have a pest problem with Canada's canola. They have a problem with this Liberal government. When will they finally stand up for canola farmers and start addressing this crisis with China?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for Foreign Affairs.
You know, I'm surprised the honourable member is justifying a foreign government action against Canadian farmers. It used to be when political parties debate internally for domestic policies, but we used to come together when a foreign government imposes actions against Canadian farmers. I ask the honourable member to join our government in standing up for Canadian farmers and defending our excellent and high-quality products as we resolve this issue.
The honourable member for Flamborough-Glanbrook.
Mr. Speaker, steel producers and fabricators across the Greater Hamilton area have been feeling the pain for almost a year, and now they are strapped with a crippling carbon tax and the threat of the removal of the one market protection they've had. Those who rely on good quality Canadian steel are feeling the effects and are very concerned. Producers, fabricators, and steel workers need more than talk and photo ops from the Prime Minister. Why did the Prime Minister sign this new agreement without getting these tariffs removed?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We will always stand up for Canadian workers and Canadian interests. Canada responded to the illegal U.S. measures with dollar-for-dollar tariffs of import of steel, aluminum, and other products from the U.S. As we work to completely repeal the U.S. tariffs, we recognize the potential impacts on Canadian businesses, workers, and communities. While Canada's countermeasures remain in place, we are providing targeted relief for Canadian manufacturers facing exceptional circumstances, like challenges around the lack of domestic supply. We're also imposing provisional safeguards on imports of 7 steel products that are causing or threatening harm to Canadian steel producers and workers because of increased foreign imports caused by the U.S. tariffs. We will remain steadfast in our support of the Canadian steel and aluminum industry. Thank you.
Honourable for Belleuil-Chambly. Spring has finally come, at least we hope so. And with the warmer weather comes pleasure craft on the Richelieu River. To stop erosion of the riverbanks and to protect pleasure craft and respect neighboring inhabitants, we've been asking for better regulations for years. In 2016, I tabled a motion on this. Will the Liberals listen to the municipalities of the Richelieu Valley and the Chambly Basin and amend federal legislation to protect the Richelieu River?
Secretary to the Minister of Transportation.
Speaker, I'm happy to rise on this issue once again. I spoke to the House Leader in Parliament in question period just a few weeks ago on a similar issue. We directed the House Leader to funding that is available, and we encourage their constituents to apply for that funding. And if that member would also like to meet with me, I'd be happy to do that meeting as well.
Honourable Member for Salaberry-sur-Roi. Mr. Speaker, do you know what issues children and youth care the most about? The health of our planet and climate change. Unfortunately, we learned last week that Canada is warming twice as fast as the rest of the world average. Section 24 of the UN Convention on the Rights of Children recognizes the right of every child to live in a clean environment. Yet, there are no federal institutions to defend the rights and concerns of children. I proposed a solution to change this. Will the government support my bill to create a federal youth commissioner? Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Families.
For this very good idea. It's one that we're exploring through appointments to various commissions and bodies within the department I represent. In fact, we had discussions about that today. We're looking to make sure that children's voices and the voice of youth are present when we deal with poverty, when we deal with housing, when we deal with all of the issues that affect children in this country. The member opposite has put forth a good motion. We'll be looking at that motion and coming back to the House with our position on it. Thank her for it.
Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, the Liberals said they want to protect jobs in Quebec, even though they know very well that SN jobs were not at stake and they interfered in the political system. In 2015, when the Liberals came to power, they did everything to hamper the Davie shipyard and to prevent it from building the Asterix, putting 1,000 people to work, which would have. Why did the Prime Minister want to cancel this contract and hurt Davie? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, our government is seeking to strengthen the Royal Navy and its capacities to serve Canadians. This was a major shipyard, and we recognize the expertise of this shipyard. The expertise the shipyard did have a contract, and even there was a recent one this fall that was given to Davie, and all shipyards have the work that they need, and all the jobs at the Davie shipyard in Quebec are being protected. The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Saint-Charles. In 2015, the Conservatives gave the Asterix contract to the to Davie shipyard, but the Liberals did everything to cancel this contract and to prevent the construction of the Asterix and to kill the project. Why are the Liberals doing everything they can to punish the whistleblower on this affair? Why? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. I appreciate this question. I'd like to underscore that in this Norman affair, we're following the rule of law and all of the orders of the judge. We're cooperating with all the court orders. And once again, I'd like to underscore here in the House that's important to let the judge act independently. And now the Conservatives are asking us to intervene in this file. Well, this goes against the rule of law that we are following, that any other country should follow.
Melville.
Speaker, Vice Admiral Mark Norman is a 38-year, highly decorated, deeply respected member of the Canadian Forces. As Vice Chief of Defence Staff, he has served with honour and dignity. Today, he is trying to prove his innocence in another Liberal scandal. The Prime Minister is again undermining the rule of law, refusing to release documents that he has the right to receive to prove his case in court. Once again, the Prime Minister is abusing his office, manipulating these court proceedings. Why?
Well, Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice.
Speaker, with great respect, that is an absolute misconstruction of what is actually taking place. There is a court that is dealing with a third-party records application. We've heard the court order. We are cooperating with that court order as any government would. We provided the documents. It is now for a judge in the Ontario court to decide whether our cooperation has been sufficient or whether it is deficient. It is for a judge to determine this matter. It is not to be debated in the House of Commons, nor is it to be determined by a political actor. That is what the independence of the rule of law is all about. That is what I would urge the Conservatives to respect.
The honourable member for Thunder Bay Rainy River.
Mr. Speaker, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People is a cornerstone of our government's relationship with Indigenous peoples. And in 2016, our government became a full supporter of the Declaration without qualification. Our government is moving forward on key legislative initiatives that support the implementation of the Declaration. We have also supported Bill C-262 as an important next step. Can the Parliamentary Secretary update this House on the status of this important legislative measure?
Good question. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Bill C-262 is a key step in implementing a United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. Passed by the House last spring, it is now stalled in the other place as a result of conservative procedural delay tactics. Wow. While we have enormous respect for the independence and work of the other place, reconciliation with Indigenous peoples, and particularly this piece of legislation, cannot be subject to partisan and procedural games. I urge the Conservative members of the other place and the members in this House who are in their caucus to heed the unanimous motion passed by this House this week and stop their inexcusable delay tactics.
For Oshawa.
Mr. Speaker, in November, the Prime Minister promised that he'd have a plan for saving jobs in Oshawa. Instead of saving jobs, we have seen more job losses announced in the automotive sector, this time in Windsor. The Prime Minister pretended to stand up for jobs at SNC-Lavalin to the point of political interference in a criminal trial. Those jobs weren't even at risk. Meanwhile, we stand to lose 15,000 plus jobs in Durham Region, and Windsor stands to lose over 1,500 jobs. Mr. Speaker, instead of just acting, why can't this Prime Minister act when there's a real crisis?
Hear, hear. Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, our government has always been committed to promoting and supporting the automotive sector and their families. We've invested millions in this sector, and we've created tens of thousands of jobs since we came to power. Some examples: 110,000 million to Cambridge. We've supported Guelph, and Hyundai installations also have been invested in. We're continuing to invest in the automotive sector so we can ensure we build the cars of the future.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Communities like those in my city of Brampton are in need to adapt to the effect of climate change. Reducing the impact of natural disaster is critical in keeping Canadians safe, supporting the strong economy and the middle class. Can the Minister update the House on what the government is doing to build climate resilience in the cities like Brampton? Thank you.
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the member for his question. Our government is committed to helping communities build the infrastructure they need for this century and help them better withstand climate change. That's why we're investing $2 billion over 10 years through the Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund. Our government was in Brampton last week to announce that we're investing over $22 million towards an erosion protection project that will protect the homes and businesses of residents in the entire region. This is a vitally important work, Mr. Speaker, and we look forward to continuing that partnership across Canada. Thank you very much.
Honourable member for Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Brock.
Speaker, SNC-Lavalin
Arctic surf clam and no-show in Vietnam. India trip sideshow, fundraising from the PMO, and Trans Mountain no-go. Secret fundraisers with Chinese billionaires, terrorists being millionaires, and Panama paper fundraising shares. Forgotten mansions, ethics sanctions, more no Chappelle stock sale, and veterans asking for too much fail. Phoenix Pay, Island Vacay, investment flying far away, cash for access soiree, balanced budget, no way.
All right.
Speaker, why do Canadians always have to pay?
Accountable Government House Leader.
I have to say that's probably the most support of the arts I've ever seen from a Conservative, so I think that is pretty impressive to see them coming along. And I know that member is concerned for his constituents, and I know that he's concerned about future generation, and he forgot to say the word environment, but I know it's on his mind, and I know he challenges the leader of the official opposition every day to come out with a climate plan. But I've got good news for his constituents. We are going to make sure that transitioning to a cleaner, greener economy is more affordable, and that's why constituents in his riding, constituents all across Ontario will be able to receive $307 for a family of 4, which will be more than awesome, so we can have a better economy.
The other member for Regina, Louvain.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Speaker ruled that he cannot enforce the Parliament of Canada Act rules for caucus expulsions, which are also not subject to judicial review. If neither the courts nor the Speaker uphold the law, party leaders are free to ignore it. A possible solution would be to empower an independent Attorney General separate from the Justice Minister to enforce the Parliament of Canada Act. Does the government agree?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
I want to thank the member for that thoughtful question. I just want to make sure that he knows that at our first caucus meeting, the caucus chair wrote the Speaker to inform you of the will of our caucus on these measures. And in regards to the role of the Attorney General, we know that Canadians expect and deserve to have faith in their institutions and the people who serve them. And that's exactly why when the Prime Minister observed the testimony that took place at the Justice Committee, he brought forward the Honourable Anne McClellan so that she could actually look into this matter and provide advice and guidance to the government. This information will also be available for future government when it comes to the dual role of the Minister of Justice as well as the Attorney General of Canada. I can assure him that we're taking it very seriously.
The honourable member for Mirabel. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While BTB is developing the Rwanda Airport, the federal government is thinking about authorizing cuts to the air transport safety. It doesn't make sense to let NAV Canada cut assistance to the third largest airport in Quebec. It's dangerous and it hampers regional development. Will the minister listen to the business community and the BTB, the airlines, pilots, local officials, and others who all want the flight information services at FSS Rwanda to be maintained? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Transport.
Of our transportation system. Canadians can rest assured, that member can rest assured that we have one of the clearest, safest records in all of Canada. And when it comes to individual investments and individual decisions, we are making clear investments right across the country for the safety of our airports. We're seeing the results, and that member can go back to his constituents and safely say that we have one of the clearest safety records in the entire country, entire world, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Mirabel.
Merci, Monsieur. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government tabled its credits yesterday. These are the last spending authorizations before the elections. Almost all the initiatives in the last budget are in air, except for one big one, the $3.9 billion promised to supply management sector. This amount is not found in any of the financial tables of the budget. Can the government tell us where this $3.9 billion went? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance. We've always been clear. We want to help supply management farmers, and we're going to provide them with just and fair compensation, and we intend to do so. We've always defended supply management. We always will do so, and that's not always been the case for the Conservatives. Thank you.
For question period, c'est fini pour la période de questions aujourd'hui. Un appel au règlement, l'honorable.
A point of order, the Honourable Member for Rosemont, La Petite Patrie. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. A Damocles sword is hanging above the steel and aluminum workers. Their production will be affected in 2 weeks. Therefore, I think that if you seek it, you will find unanimous consent for the following motion. That, given that many of the 23,000 direct jobs and indirect jobs in the steel industry are at risk, and that many of our economic partners, like the European Union, protect their workers with permanent safeguard measures, the House urge the Minister of Finance to implement permanent safeguard measures for our steel industry immediately to avoid the deadline of April 27th, 2019. Does the honourable member have unanimous consent of the House to move the motion? Agreed. The House has heard the motion. Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Carried.
Un appel au règlement.
Point of order, the honourable member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. During question period, the member for Mississauga Centre extended a hand to the others on canola. That's why I will extend a hand to the government and seek unanimous consent of the House to hold an emergency debate on the canola crisis.
Honourable député.
Does the honourable member have the unanimous consent of the House to move the motion? No. There is no unanimous consent.
Ne plus d'appel au règlement.
No further points of order. Good, we can continue.
What's going on? Okay. I'm sorry. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Standing Order 36, Bracket 8, I have the honour to table in both official languages the government's response to 6 petitions.
Introduction of government bills. Statements by ministers. Reports from interparliamentary delegations. Présentation de rapport.
Presenting reports from committees.
Dépôt de.
Introduction of private members' bills. First reading of Senate public bills.
Ms. Glidus, seconded by Mr. Berthold, moves that S-214, an act to amend the Food and Drug Act, cruelty-free cosmetics, be now read a first time. The Honourable Member for Sarnia-Lambton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure to rise in the House and table S-214. I want to thank Senator Carolyn Stewart-Olson for her initiative. This bill proposes to eliminate animal testing on cosmetics. And there are a number of organizations that have worked with me to bring this bill forward, including the Humane Society, the Animal Alliance of Canada, the Cosmetics Alliance of Canada, Cruelty Free International, and Lush Fresh Handmade Cosmetics. These organizations have worked to bring 7 amendments, which will be needed as we study this bill further. The amendments have to do with ministerial powers, responsibilities and definition of manufacturers and importers' responsibilities, and the clarity for testing to sell in other countries. So I'm very pleased to bring this forward. This will bring us as the 40th country to consider such legislation and bring us into alignment with Europe and California. So thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
When will this, oh, sorry. The motion is deemed adopted. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
In this bill, Premier Minister supports the law.
When shall the bill be read a second time? At the next sitting of the House. Motions. Motion. Presenting petitions. The Honourable Member for Thunder Bay Rainy River.
Mr. Speaker, this is quite timely. I rise today to present 2 petitions on behalf of the residents of Thunder Bay Rainy River in support of Bill 214, the Cruelty-Free Cosmetics Act that would ban the sale and manufacture of animal-tested cosmetics and their ingredients in Canada.
Presenting petitions, the Honourable Member for Edmonton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the former president of the Greater Victoria Elder Care Foundation, Vancouver Island's largest hospital foundation supporting seniors, I'm very pleased to present petitions from several hundred constituents as well as people across the country calling on the government to establish a national strategy on palliative care. Thank you.
Presenting petitions, the honourable member for Guelph.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to rise and present a petition from the great people of Guelph that are concerned about climate change, knowing that it's real and that it represents an existential threat to humanity, that pollution shouldn't be free. Research has shown that the price of pollution is the most effective and lowest cost way to transition to a cleaner, greener economy, and that Canada can have an ambitious, effective climate plan, creating new jobs and making life affordable for Canadians. So the people of Guelph would like to see Canada and the government of Canada continuing to do the great work that we're doing to combat climate change through the market pricing mechanisms that we're using.
Presenting petitions, the honourable member for Saskatoon-Grasswood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have with me a number of signed petitions from all over Saskatchewan calling upon the House of Commons to support Bill S-214 and ban the sale and/or manufacture of animal-tested cosmetics and their ingredients in Canada moving forward. Thank you very much.
Presenting petitions. Very good. Orders, questions on the order paper. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If the government's responses to questions numbers 2274 to 2280 could be made for orders for return, these returns would be tabled immediately. And furthermore, Mr. Speaker, I would ask then that questions be allowed to stand after that.
It's the pleasure of the House that the aforementioned questions be made orders for return and that they be tabled immediately. Yes. Agreed and so ordered. Orders of the day.
Government orders, Government Bills Commons, resuming debate on the amendment of Ms. Gladue at second reading of Bill C-97, Budget Implementation Act 2019, number 1.
Resuming debate, reprise du débat. The honourable member for New Westminster Burnaby has 3 minutes and 50 seconds remaining.
So, Mr. Speaker, before we were interrupted by question period, I was talking about how this BIA is really a BIA, like a budget of broken promises. What it does systematically to show over the last 4 years how many times the Liberal government has betrayed its commitments to actually try to do something that would be supportive of regular Canadians from coast to coast to coast. And we've raised the issue of pharmacare in this House numerous times, as has the leader of the NDP, the member from Burnaby South. The fact that we do not have pharmacare after 4 years of Liberal government shows the paucity of their ideas and their ability to actually carry them forward. The fact that we have not seen any investments in affordable housing in any meaningful way. And Mr. Speaker, you'll recall it was a former Liberal government that destroyed the National Housing Program. Symbolically, Liberals love to talk about housing, but that hasn't helped people in actually building units across the country. And the fact is, as we found out by accessing the Access to Information Act, that the Liberals, by the time they finish their 4-year mandate, will have constructed or are in the process of constructing 14,000 units across the country. That's it. 14,000. That's all. Now, Mr. Speaker, I pointed out earlier after the Second World War, the federal government had actually invested the point in over 3 years. They built 300,000 affordable housing units across the length and breadth of Canada to make sure that returning men and women in the service were taken care of. After 4 years, the Liberals will be able to point to 14,000 units either built or still in the process of being built. Now, Mr. Speaker, hundreds of thousands of families are in precarious housing situations. Millions of Canadian families worry about whether or not they will be able to keep a roof over their head, or whether the roof over their head is something that they can make sustainable. And when we look at the appalling conditions in Indigenous communities that the Liberal government has done very little to address, that shows again the paucity of ideas and the broken promises and betrayals coming out of this most recent budget, this last budget, the last chance budget for the Liberals to actually get it right. So on all the important issues, Liberals have simply betrayed their commitments, except one, and that is their commitments they didn't make during the election campaign, but that they have certainly carried out to provide as much supports and help to the pampered and privileged and the wealthiest Canadians as is absolutely possible. And Mr. Speaker, there's no better illustration than the $12 million splurged on Loblaws, one of Canada's most profitable corporations, $1 billion in profits last year, or almost, and run by one of Canada's richest Canadians. In fact, two men now have as much wealth as a third of Canadians. And yet what the Liberals have done is taken by not applying pharmacare or affordable housing, taken from the very poor and the middle class in this country to give to Loblaws, $12 million. That shows an inability to understand what Canadians are going through. Mr. Speaker, on October 21st, Canadians will have the ability to judge the government on that. And certainly we're putting forward strong proposals that will help bring this country forward and provide the supports that Canadians need. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. The Honourable Member for Guelph.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thanks to the Honourable Member across the way. I was very interested in the comments that he was making around household debt. And, Mr. Speaker, I was going to ask this question last night before the member from the Okanagan rose to try and close the House and really stall debate on this matter. But maybe this member could help me with the question on debt. The credit market borrowing fell by 19.5% to $84.6 million in 2008, which is now the lowest level since 2014. Mortgage loan demand has risen by $2.3 billion to $12.3 billion. So that is looking at how do people get into housing, and it looks like there's a lot of activity there, maybe a reflection of 825,000 Canadians coming out of poverty and Canadians creating 950,000 jobs under this economy. Canada now has the highest foreign direct investment in the G7, higher than Germany by almost 2 times. I'm wondering whether this growing economy is something that he has some selective vision on, or whether he actually does see some positive things happening in our economy.
Member for New Westminster, Burnaby.
Well, and there is absolutely the stark difference between Liberals and New Democrats. Right there, Mr. Speaker. In a word, he couldn't have said it more appropriately. Yes, wow, the banks are reaping profits and getting lots of loans from Canadians and reaping record profits. So doesn't that mean that everybody's taken care of? And everything I've said today, that we have the highest family debt levels, not only in Canadian history, but in the history of any industrialized country. And Liberals just blank out because they're doing okay. When I say, as we saw with stark clarity just a few weeks ago, that half of Canadian families are $200 away from basic bankruptcy in the course of a month, $200 away from falling even further into debt if they are lucky to be able to get more loans. And Liberals' eyes just glaze over because they're saying, well, the markets are doing well, the CEOs are doing well, executive bonuses are doing well. Look, Loblaws is going to get CEO bonuses for the $12 million that Liberals took away from students and seniors to splurge on one of the most profitable companies in the country. And so that is the stark difference, Mr. Speaker. When Liberals say, hey, everything's great for us, it's great for CEOs, we actually look at what is happening to Canadians, and for Canadians it's been 4 miserable years under this Liberal government.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. L'honorable député de
Honourable Member for Sherbrooke. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I want to thank my colleague for his excellent speech. When I spoke on this bill, I focused on the fact that the solution that the Liberals found to help people have access to a first home was to give them the opportunity to withdraw more money from their RSPs. So they increased the limit from $25,000 to $35,000. Now, when I asked some of my other colleagues if they had seen young people in their ridings who had told them that they didn't have enough money, they wanted to withdraw more money from their RSP for their first home, and that was an obstacle for them to home ownership, well, they said no. No one said that. So I'll ask my colleague the question, does he know any young people in Burnaby, New Westminster, who think that their RSP amounts are insufficient to be able to buy property? The Honourable Member for New Westminster, Burnaby. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I wanted to thank the member for Sherbrooke, who had actually, who became the youngest ever finance critic in the House of the in the history of the House of Commons. And he got that position because of his knowledge and the fact that he's very hardworking. He works hard not only for the people of Sherbrooke, but for all Canadians. So I just want to congratulate him for that. I think he richly deserves that position. And he asked exactly the right question. Now, with RSPs, we're talking about young people who are trying to pay off all of the debt that they have from their studies, because the former Conservative government and the current Liberal government refused, and have refused for years, to help with that. They've always decided that big CEOs are the most important people. We need to cut business taxes, but you know, students paid the price for this. They've had very high student debt levels. It's just insane, insanely difficult to pay down. And these people who are paying off their student debts now are being asked to take RSP savings, if they even have them, to pay for a home. But they don't have money to even put it in RSP because they're paying off debts that they've inherited from the Conservative and Liberal governments. So to say that, oh, we've found a solution, I mean, you know, why don't we just let young people withdraw money from their RSP savings? That just shows how out of touch this government is with the daily lives of ordinary Canadians. And that is going to be reflected on October 21st.
Commentaire, the honourable member for Winnipeg North.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was listening to the member's first 17-minute speech and then the 3 minutes after question period, and the member embodies what I believe is the NDP fantasy land, Mr. Speaker. If you listen to the New Democrats, you would think that if you're born in Canada, good news, you're going to be given a house. If you're born in Canada, good news, you're going to have anything you could possibly imagine because the NDP, they will just give it to you, Mr. Speaker. The reality of government, as we have seen NDPs at the provincial level, is far from that fantasy land, Mr. Speaker. And I would suggest that the member opposite might want to look at some of those NDP governments because there's a sense of reality. And the reality inside this House in the last 4 years is, in fact, we have seen many progressive policies. A policy that saw Canada's wealthiest 1% get an increase in taxes, Mr. Speaker, something in which the member voted against. We saw a government that brought in a policy to give a tax break to Canada's middle class, something in which the NDP voted against. What about the measures that lifted thousands of children in every region of our country out of poverty? The NDP voted against. What about the thousands of seniors that were lifted out of poverty, Mr. Speaker? The NDP voted against. Measure after measure. They're in that fantasy land there, Mr. Speaker. I don't quite understand it. When during the last election, Jack Layton himself said, we are going to balance the budget. Well, Mr. Speaker, it just doesn't add up. And my question to my colleague and friend across the way, can he step out of fantasy land for a while and tell us, does his new leader believe, as his former leader did, that Canada has to have a balanced budget at all costs?
Parliamentary, or the honourable member for New Westminster, Burnaby.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. First off, aside from the rant, and I'll come back to that in a moment, the member did point out something that is very important to note, and the fiscal period returns over the last 30 years show this collectively, that NDP governments actually have the best record at managing money and paying down debt. That's the fiscal period returns from the Ministry of Finance show that over the last 30 years. Now, the NDP takes as its fundamental principles, as Tommy Douglas did, our first leader, actually helping people. And yes, we will never deviate from that course of making sure that regular Canadians are taken care of. Yep. The Conservatives and Liberals say, well, we're going to balance the books, but they don't, even on that score. But let's get back to his point about Fantasyland, that money doesn't grow on trees, except that it does laws in liberal land for CEOs. If you're a corporate CEO for Loblaws, you want $12 million bucks. You show up at a Cash for Access fundraiser for the Liberal Party, and days later, you get $12 million. Do seniors get it? No. Do students get it? No. Do hardworking families that are now having to couple jobs together because now there are more and more part-time, precarious, temporary jobs, so they're cobbling together jobs. And yes, the Liberals will say, well, we've got some jobs, but the reality is families are struggling to make ends meet. Families are struggling under the worst family debt load crisis in the industrialized world, and families, half of Canadian families, are a couple $100s away in any given month from falling into insolvency. Those are the realities. But in the liberal fantasy land, if you're a corporate CEO, hey, you run Kinder Morgan, here's $1 billion for free. We're going to up the price. Hey, you're asking this amount? We'll give you another $1 billion on top of that. Oh, you want tax cuts? We'll give you $14 billion in tax cuts in the fall economic statement. So, in liberal fantasy land, money does grow on trees, but it only goes to wealthy Canadians. For the NDP, we believe regular Canadians, hardworking Canadians deserve better, and that's what they're going to get after October 21st.
Bravo. Reprise du débat.
Resuming debate.
Honorable député.
The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Louis. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a great pleasure for me to rise in the House this afternoon and to talk a little bit about this budget. To start, Mr. Speaker, I wanted to let you know that I'm going to be sharing my time with the member for Parkdale High Park.
Budget 2019 continues to build on the Liberal vision for Canada. And this is a vision for a prosperous Canada where all boats rise together. And this, of course, Mr. Speaker, is a precondition for a harmonious democracy where social justice reigns, Mr. Speaker. Because we know that when there's growing inequality, the middle class, in fact, everyone loses faith in the democratic institutions that are so important to this country. So it's very important for our democracy, not only for our economy, that we strengthen the middle class, that we have a prosperous economy where, as I said, all boats rise together. Now, our vision for the middle class is focused really on three things. And this has been a recurring theme through the 3.5 years where we've had the great privilege and honor to make decisions in government. And those three things are rebuilding and expanding our infrastructure. Number two, creating a 21st century labor force. And number three, creating an environmentally sustainable economy that generates jobs, but also a better quality of life. Because, Mr. Speaker, yes, it's important to have jobs. It's important to have prosperity. But if you have all that and your quality of life is degrading because your environment is degrading, the risk to your health is increasing because of a poor environment, then people start to ask themselves, what are we working for? So we're working, obviously, to put our skills and talents to good use, but also we're working so that we can live in a country that has a good quality of life and a strong democracy. Now, Mr. Speaker, we pursue these objectives while at the same time giving a helping hand to those who may need a bit of a helping hand in order to participate more fully in the economy. So, as a result, this budget has included measures to help seniors who are on GIS actually earn more money before their GIS payments are affected. And of course, in past budgets, we've instituted measures that will help children who are tomorrow's leaders, tomorrow's workers. We've included measures like the Canada Child Benefit to ensure that they can grow up strong and healthy and be good citizens and productive members of the economy. And finally, going back to Budget 2018, we instituted measures to improve the chances of success of women entrepreneurs and to increase the labor force participation rate of women. Because as we know, if we can have a labor force participation rate for women that is equal to that for men, our GDP by some estimates would be boosted by 4%, which is not insignificant. Now, as I say, Mr. Speaker, Budget 2019 builds on that vision. Let me speak a little bit about infrastructure. Monsieur le Président, lorsqu'on parle d'infrastructure,
Mr. Speaker, infrastructure doesn't just mean repairing potholes. That said, Mr. Speaker, someone was talking to me not long ago and suggested that, now, okay, look, filling potholes is important. That's not nothing. But if we took all of the money that people spent every year on hubcaps and things like that, if people took that money and reinvested it into other repairs that they have to do on their cars, if they took all of that money and put it in RSP, imagine how much money Canadians who drive would have. So potholes aren't nothing.
Is about more than that. It's about building capacity. It's about building the capacity we need to have a strong 21st century economy, not only today but in the future. Infrastructure is about building capacity to communicate, not only through high-speed internet access, but also through public transportation, which allows people to go from point A to point B for meetings, business meetings, for example, business meetings that create wealth. I know a lot is done on the internet these days and so on and so forth, but ask any expert in business or economy, and they will tell you that face-to-face meetings are important in terms of generating the relationships and creating the networks that are really fundamentally at the root of all wealth creation. Now, Mr. Speaker, what else does the budget do? Well, it focuses on creating, as I said, a 21st century labor force. And one of the main measures in the budget that helps to do this is the Canada Training Benefit. Because as we know, skills gaps hold the economy back. And they hold the economy back even more when you're in an economy that, because of the accelerating rate of technological change, is moving ahead very quickly. So the Canada Training Benefit, which offers a lifetime credit of up to $5,000 earned at a rate of $250 per year to those who wish to upgrade their skills for the 21st century economy, that Canada Training Benefit is very important. And also attached to that Canada Training Benefit is an EI benefit of 4 weeks, which will allow people to earn some income while they are retraining, because it's fine to say, well, here's some money to pay for some courses so that you can retrain, but you'll be off work, so you won't be able to sustain yourself during that period. So attached to the Canada Training Benefit is an important EI benefit. Now, as I say, we've also in the past invested invested money in the Business Development Bank, specifically for female entrepreneurs and so on. Now, on the environment, Mr. Speaker, glaciers are melting, floodwaters are rising, heat waves endanger the lives of the vulnerable, and by that I mean seniors and those who cannot escape the urban heat islands. All this is happening while the Conservatives twiddle their thumbs, Mr. Speaker. Now, what have we done? We've brought in a price on pollution. Experts agree that if you are serious about combating climate change, the cheapest and most efficient way to do that is through a price on pollution. And I quote the Guardian newspaper, which said not long ago, quote, "Economists widely agree that introducing a carbon price is the single most effective way for countries to reduce their emissions." And I'm very proud that our government has launched the federal backstop, which will apply to 4 provinces that have not instituted mechanisms for pricing pollution. And of course, with that backstop comes a remittance to the citizens of those provinces, so that at the end of the day, the price on pollution does not impact their family budgets. Now, many constituents have said, well, that's great, a price on pollution, but you need to do more. You need to do more, and in fact, that is what our government is doing. We're bringing in a clean fuel standard which will be based on a system of tradable credits. Now, I know the Conservatives don't like systems of tradable credits, but this clean fuel standard will incentivize fuel distributors and others to modify their fuels so that they produce less greenhouse gas emissions. And also, if you look at the experience in California, a clean fuel standard will encourage, for example, transit companies to shift to electric fleets. So that's very important. What else are we doing? Well, we're investing in creating a pan-Canadian network of electric charging stations and natural gas and hydrogen refueling stations. And as a matter of fact, I'm very pleased and proud that our government announced recently and back in January a $5 million investment to build 100 fast charging stations for electric vehicles in the province of Quebec, including, I'm pleased to say, 2 stations in Beaconsfield in my riding of Lac-Saint-Louis and 2 stations in Kirkland, also in my constituency, and they will be built by Hydro-Quebec with funding from NRCan's Electric Vehicle and Alternative Fuel Infrastructure Deployment Initiative. What else are we doing to increase demand for zero emissions vehicles, including, by the way, plug-in hybrids? Well, this budget takes the very important step of offering up to a $5,000 incentive for those who would purchase those vehicles. So I'm very proud of the budget. It's making progress in many important areas. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for your time.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires, l'honorable.
The Honourable Member for Longueuil-Saint-Hubert. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank my colleague from Lac-Saint-Louis for his speech. I noticed, of course, that he's very proud about the speech, but also he was very insistent on talking about the environment and climate change, and I thank him for that. I think we can't talk about that enough. I have 2 questions for him. First, he talked about plug-in hybrid vehicles, so I wanted to just remind me if, in fact, those plug-in hybrid vehicles, like the Chrysler Pacifica, which is made in Windsor and which is the only plug-in hybrid vehicle made in Canada, if he can give me more details about that. And second, now, this is an experienced politician, and he knows well that in the next 6 months, everything that will happen between parties is just going to be a debate about the carbon tax. Should we have it? Should we not? And essentially, this debate is not going to go anywhere. So if you think of the resignation of Nicolas Hulot in France, for example, he said that you can't have too much polarization in Canada. You don't want yellow vests in Canada. We need to try and have a consensus. We need to have some kind of social acceptability around these issues. So does he not think that it would be a good idea for us to arrive at a nonpartisan approach before the election so that we can meet our greenhouse gas emissions targets? The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Louis. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank my colleague for those 2 questions. For the first one, obviously the budget has not been passed yet. I imagine that the details are being worked out when it comes to the $5,000 subsidy for electric vehicles. But I can't answer his question because I don't have those details yet. But I think that that subsidy, well, that people who bought vehicles after the date of the budget will be eligible, but I don't have the details. As far as this nonpartisanship is concerned, I completely agree. People need to be able to talk. And in the context of Canadian democracy, this is the chamber where we have those discussions. We can't turn our backs to each other. We need to listen to each other. And we can't just listen to ourselves in our own parties. We need to listen to our constituents as well, including the ones who didn't vote for us. So I completely agree. We need to stop mudslinging. That's the path forward. I know that often it's in committee where people really work together to meet some of those really important targets, including when it comes to fighting climate change.
Questions and comments on la député de...
Honourable Member for Saint-Boniface Saint-Vital.
One of the issues I'm very proud of that we've accomplished as a government since being elected is that we've removed 81 long-term drinking boil water advisories across Canada. There are under 60 left. It's not perfect, as the NDP would have it be, but it's very good and we're going in the right direction. Budget 2019 has $739 million over 5 years for boil water removals, with at least $200 million in the next year and a half. I know the member has a particular interest and expertise in water. I wonder if he could talk about the importance of this initiative.
The honourable member for Sault-Saint-Louis.
And that's an important question, and those are the kinds of things that we should be talking about in this House. And to the point of the honourable member before, instead of engaging in hyper-partisanship, that $700 million, of course, is added to the $1.8 billion that we've committed over 5 years. And indeed, I think many Canadians were wondering why we couldn't solve this problem. And I think it was a question of funding, of course, but it was also a question of political will. And I know that our government has really made a priority of removing these long-term drinking water advisories. And I think it's because of a focus of attention in addition to the funds that we've made progress. And I know that we are extremely committed. The Prime Minister is fundamentally committed to removing all long-term drinking water advisories by March 2021. And we're on the right track. The member's right. We're on the right track. We're going to get there. And that will be a proud moment for Canada.
Resuming debate, reprise du débat, the honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I want to continue the excellent commencement to this debate in terms of this 20-minute segment, carrying on from the comments that were made by the member who just spoke. Mr. Speaker, I'm rising in this chamber to speak to Bill C-97, the Budget Implementation Act. This bill continues our government's commitment to put forward a progressive and positive agenda for all Canadians. This budget has received praise from numerous sources, and I've indeed heard about it from the engaged and informed constituents of my riding of Parkdale High Park, some of whom are actually here observing the proceedings today. So welcome, Mr. Van Dam. For the many important initiatives it will fund in relationship to the environment, in relationship to anti-racism, in relationship to support for places of worship, Indigenous languages, students, helping the LGBTQ2 community, infrastructure, health initiatives, social finance, and so much more. During my remarks today, I will detail the highlights of this budget that relate to Bill C-97, which will improve the lives of my constituents in Parkdale High Park, as well as Canadians right across the country. First, it's important to thank the many stakeholders and individual Canadians for their hard work in advocating for various causes and issues that are raised in the budget with their submissions that were presented to both the Minister of Finance and the Finance Committee. I want to begin my substantive remarks with one of the most important priorities for our country and indeed for the world at large, which is just touched upon the previous statements. That is the issue of climate change and its impact on our environment. I agree wholeheartedly with the question that was posed by the NDP heritage critic about this issue needs to be a pan-governmental issue. It needs to be a non-partisan issue. Unfortunately, to date, it is not. As many Canadians know, our government has placed a price on pollution, which came into full force on April the 1st of this year. This is a historic tool, Madam Speaker, that will ensure that pollution is no longer free, and it reflects what I hear from my constituents and people right around this country, that climate change is absolutely real and that we must take action now. In Budget 2019 and through this very bill, we are taking steps in our plan to protect the environment and at the same time grow a clean economy while making life more affordable for Canadians. What this Budget Implementation Act will do is implement a few additional measures. Our $1 billion plan for investments in energy efficiency, which includes our new home retrofit program that will help Canadians lower their electricity and their energy bills. It also includes a new $5,000 subsidy for Canadians investing in zero-emission vehicles. Those are Canadians in my riding of Parkdale High Park, Canadians in every riding around this country. It will also support zero-emission vehicle manufacturing right here in Canada. This is how we make meaningful progress on fighting climate change now, Madam Speaker. Next is an issue that touches all of us in this country, particularly those that include my residents in Parkdale High Park in Toronto. That is the cost of housing. Everyone deserves an affordable place to call home, But far too often, Madam Speaker, Canadians are being priced out of the housing market. This bill will implement housing investments from Budget 2019 that we are making to address housing affordability. The important initiative is the first-time homebuyer incentive, which will allow first-time homebuyers to reduce their monthly insured mortgage payments by way of a shared equity mortgage from the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, CMHC, which would not have to be paid off until the unit is eventually resold. The shared equity mortgage could be up to 10% for a new build or up to 5% for a repurchase. We're also allowing Canadians to withdraw an additional $10,000 from their RRSPs for the purposes of buying a home without penalty. As well, we are increasing the fund for the Rental Construction Financing Initiative, which will help build thousands of new, well-priced units right around the country. And that is important, Madam Speaker, because we've heard constantly that in order to address housing, you have to address the supply. C97, this bill will also implement our plan to modernize the Canadian Homebuyers Plan. The plan is intended to assist Canadians with their down payment and, by extension, the cost of purchasing a home. With this legislation, we're increasing the Homebuyers Plan withdrawal limit from $25,000 to $35,000, which will make it more flexible to adapting to changing familial circumstances. And that's in reference to the RRSP notion that I raised earlier. This is on top of our overall $40 billion national housing strategy that now exceeds actually $50 billion, Madam Speaker, when you combine previous budgetary allocations with the allocations currently being made. This national housing strategy has already been a tremendous success right around the country. And how does it affect my riding? Well, I'll tell you how, Madam Speaker. Two very concrete ways. We have 5 federally subsidized co-ops in my riding of Parkdale High Park. Every single one of the tenants that have a rent geared to income subsidy that is provided by the federal government is having that subsidy renewed by virtue of this budget and by virtue of our policies on housing. Secondly, we've made a historic announcement of $1.3 billion via the National Housing Strategy that will come directly to Toronto to help those who are in social housing through the Toronto Community Housing Corporation. 58,000 units will be affected by this investment, which is the single largest investment in Canadian history dedicated directly to municipality. What will it do? It will help to renovate, maintain, and repair that housing stock, ensuring that that housing stock remains on the market so that people are appropriately housed. That's what a housing strategy does. That's what I'm proud to defend here as a government member. Our infrastructure investments do not stop there, Madam Speaker. Once again, we are stepping up where governments like the provincial government of Doug Ford are stepping out. We particularly are investing a $2.2 billion investment into the federal gas tax fund. That gas tax transfer is being doubled this year through this budget so that municipalities who have been talking to us can commence the much-needed infrastructure repair. This is how we will ensure that infrastructure funding gets exactly where it needs to go, and more importantly, to those who have the ability to get the projects actually done. And by that, I mean local and municipal governments and grassroots community organizations. Why are we taking this step, Madam Speaker? Because it was asked for by the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. Those entities, those municipalities have expressed to our government their absolute frustration with governments like the one in Ontario led by Premier Ford that has stubbornly refused to get moving on much-needed infrastructure repairs purely because of partisan considerations. What we are doing is going directly to those municipalities to address their needs. This budget implementation bill will also implement Canada's first ever poverty reduction strategy by entrenching an official poverty line and the National Advisory Council on Poverty into law. This is in addition to the incredible news that this year that the poverty initiatives implemented by our government are indeed working. Statistics released earlier this year show that 825,000 Canadians have been lifted out of poverty and that we are 3 years ahead of the targets we set as a government. Thanks to federal initiatives, poverty has fallen 20% since 2015, and a hallmark of that initiative is the Canada Child Benefit and its targeted, means-tested approach. We're continuing with the other important commitments we've made. We're entrenching pay transparency with this act. What that means, as we well know, Mr. Speaker, is that currently women in Canada earn approximately 87 cents on the dollar compared to men. That is absolutely unacceptable. Last year's budget introduced pay equity measures, and this year's budget will introduce new pay transparency measures in Canada for federally regulated employers to reduce the wage gap. With this legislation, we will require employers to include new salary data in their annual reports to the Minister of Employment, Workforce Development and Labour in order to ensure total pay transparency measures. This is important because it will have an impact on Canadians. I want to pick up on a question that was asked to the previous member who spoke about Indigenous reconciliation and how it is vested in this budget. It is vested in two critically important ways. One, in support of over $300 million for Indigenous language maintenance, protection, and revitalization. I was very proud to have worked on the development of Bill C-91, which is a bill that will indeed revitalize, protect, and promote Indigenous languages during my time as Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Heritage. What we are now doing is coupling that statutory instrument with the financial resources to make it a reality. This is something that has been lauded by Indigenous leaders, and rightfully so, because it puts money to the commitment that we have made to reconcile with Indigenous peoples through promoting their language faculties. The second point I would point out, once again, as it needs to be stated over and over again, is that the situation with boil water advisories on reserves is deplorable, but we are making active changes to that situation. Thus far, we have lifted 81 boil water advisories around Canada. We are on track to lift all of them by March of 2021. And to demonstrate our commitment to this goal, we've dedicated an additional $733 million in this year's budget to that very important goal to ensure that no person in Canada, particularly no Indigenous person in Canada, has to boil their water in order to drink safe water. Those are the kinds of commitments that people have talked to me about in my riding, Mr. Speaker. Those are the kinds of commitments towards housing, towards reconciliation, towards poverty alleviation, towards women, towards addressing economic circumstances and job creation that people prioritize in this country. This is a budget that I'm proud to stand behind, and I urge every single member of this chamber to do exactly the same. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
Questions et commentaires.
Questions and comments.
Comments. The honourable member for Deslete, Mississippi, Churchill River.
Mr. Speaker, as I listen to the government representatives speak about Indigenous issues, I want to correct them on that side, how deplorable majority of Indigenous people have to live in poor housing, inadequate homes, the Indigenous language that he talks about. The government didn't even support the amendments to change and to strengthen the current legislation. And there were suggestions made by witnesses to spend up to $1 billion and take this seriously, and then the government said no. The government couldn't even say yes to ensuring that the commissioner would be of Indigenous. They said no to that, leaving open for both ends of if the Conservatives, they've done it before in the past, and they continue to show anything to do with Indigenous people, they do not support. They have consistent records on that from poor housing, poor education, the languages, and the list goes on. And then the government talks about boiled water advisory. Whoopie-doo, they want to be taking pride in saying that. But how many Indigenous people do they actually know? And they go visit the elders, the single moms, the young people, the schools, the healthcare facilities, even the RCMP, and say how they have to live. We live in Canada, and the Indigenous file that the government is happy about is actually not a good plan. So how can they improve, continue to improve? Yeah, you can praise your numbers and the budget, but the boiled drinking water advisory and the language legislation, why did the government not support the legislation to amend to ensure that the commissioner would be of Indigenous heritage? Thank you.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the member opposite for her question and for continued advocacy on behalf of her constituents and for Indigenous peoples in Canada. It is a contribution to this House, and it's an important voice that's being heard. What I can say in response to her is that in the work that was done on Bill C-91, which is the Indigenous Languages Act, what we did is, first of all, we took the important step of co-developing that act, meeting with Indigenous, with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit leaders around the country. I participated in those consultations, so did Minister Joly the former Minister of Heritage, as well as the current Minister of Heritage. Secondly, what we've done is we've tabled historic legislation because we know that the policy of assimilation manifested by the residential school system was one of gross assimilation and effectively cultural genocide, as was described by Beverly McLaughlin. We know that when you restore language capacity, you restore people's connections to their culture, their self-esteem, their education, and their economic outcomes improve. With respect to the specific, and this issue was raised by the TRC calls to action 13, 14, and 15, which are responded to by virtue of tabling this very legislation. The monetary amounts complement the important statutory instrument. With respect to the committee issues that she is raising, I'm not aware of how committee proceedings proceeded, nor as to what the basis was for making a determination or predetermining who would fulfill the role of the official commissioner. But I will always stand behind our government's commitment to Indigenous reconciliation, the fact that it informs every single mandate letter for every single minister in this cabinet, the fact that we've tabled language legislation, child welfare legislation, and that we have lifted 81 boil water advisories and are on track to continue to lift all of them by March of 2021. Merci beaucoup.
Question.
Thank you very much.
Comments, questions et commentaires. The honourable member for Guelph, a 30-second question and a 30-second answer, hopefully.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thanks to the member from Parkdale Hyde Park, who is my middle daughter's member of Parliament. She has a young family. She's looking at things around Canada, child benefit, improving cash flow as a young family. I mentioned earlier credit market borrowing fell by 19.5% in 2018. I'm thinking cash flow is getting improved by policies that we're introducing. Maybe the member could comment on how we're trying to help cash flow for young families.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary in 30 seconds or less, please.
In 30 seconds, I'm very proud to represent the member from Guelph's daughter in terms of having her as a constituent. What I can say to her and to many others that live in Parkdale High Park is that that's exactly what we're trying to do as a government broadly. The very first thing we voted on after selecting the Speaker, Mr. Speaker, was reducing the taxation burden on middle-income Canadians. That's critical because it puts more money in the pockets of families just like the one he has mentioned that his daughter is in. And by doing that, what we empower them to do through things like the middle-class tax cut and through things like the Canada Child Benefit, which targets people who are raising families, is we empower them to take control of their own spending and to spend on what is important for their own families, whether that's purchasing their first home or putting their kids in a new course. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Resuming debate, reprise du débat. The Honourable Member for Edmonton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. Now, I'm going to be sharing my time today with my colleague from Louis St. Laurent. For those who are watching at home who will be quickly bored by my speech, hang in there for 10 minutes. You'll get a much better speech after this.
Oh, no.
With my colleague.
Oh, no.
Now, the Liberals, I'm very pleased to join the debate today on the Liberal budget. Now, the Liberals have presented what I call a Dr. Strangelove budget, or in this case, how I stopped worrying and learned to love the debt. Because that's what the government wants Canadians to believe. Do not worry, we can continue to spend forever. Do not worry, the economy will grow forever. No recession will ever happen again. Do not worry, we can rack up debt to the very end of time. It won't be a problem. And don't worry about interest payments. Don't worry the fact that our interest payments are growing from this fiscal year from $26 billion, rising up to $33.2 billion per year in just 4-year period. That's $149 billion we are going to be paying for taxpayers, transferring to rich bondholders on Bay Street out of the pockets of taxpayers. Just over a 5-year period, $149 billion. Now, that is more than we spend per year. In the 4th year, 2023, it's going to be $33.2 billion. That's more than we spend per year in EI payments, employment insurance payments. That's more than we actually pay out in the child benefit program. That's more than we actually pay out for national defense. So here we are with the Liberal priority is paying off rich Bay Street bankers and bondholders instead of defense, instead of families, and instead of those on EI. Put it in perspective, with that money, they could give or pay for 2,750 refrigeration projects for the Weston family. Think about that. They could also provide for every single cabinet minister their own billionaire island so they can go to their island and not worry about violating the ethics laws. They can go to their own billionaire island so they don't have to worry about being invited by a paid lobbyist. Do not worry, is what Liberals are saying. Don't worry about the declining productivity rate that Canadians are suffering through. Don't worry about disappearing foreign investment. One thing I do worry about, though, we see foreign investment fleeing Canada. We see the oil industry devastated, $100 billion fleeing to the States. We see the Liberals giving Kinder Morgan $4.5 billion to take out of the country and invest in competing pipelines in the States. Do you know who we do see interested in investing in Canada that the Liberals aren't too happy to see? Huawei. We see Ongbong investing in Canada, thanks to the Liberal government. And we see the Chinese Communist government-controlled CCCC construction firm trying to buy out local Canadian infrastructure companies. They're all willing to invest in Canada, but regular people, no. But don't worry about that. Don't worry about the fact that the debt is going to rise to over $750 million over the next 5 years. And that's not including crown corporations. When you throw in the crown corporations, it's well over $1 trillion debt that Canadians are going to be carrying. This money has to be worried. But don't worry, stop worrying and learn to love it is what the Liberals are saying. But Canadians are worried. We sent out requests to my constituents, asked for their response, asked them what they think of the debt, if they feel they're further ahead than from when the Liberals took over. And this is what they're saying. Now, these are not made up information that's in the budget, such as, you know, Billy went to buy an electric vehicle and got a handout for the government. These are real Canadians, real people living in Edmonton West, and this is what they're saying. Gentleman Elmer wrote in, he goes, it's worse off and it's not improving. They're so concerned about the ramifications of Oshawa's GM plant closing. What about Alberta? We've had no oil revenue and therefore severe unemployment problems for over 3 years. We have not seen any concern about Alberta's unemployment situation. Now, we used to have 4 Liberal members of Parliament. We haven't had any of them stand up supporting Liberal, but or supporting Alberta, but we've had 4 MPs in the Liberal Party from Alberta, down to 3 because of scandal. We used to have 2 in the cabinet, now we're just down to 1 again because of scandal. But we had the member from Calgary Centre stand up, he's publicly stated, I'm going to pound my fist on the desk of the cabinet table to make sure pipelines are built. Pound the desk at the cabinet table, he said. Well, what's happened? Absolute crickets from the member, nothing. We have the Natural Resources Minister, based in Edmonton himself, from Edmonton Mill Woods.
Pounded out of cabinet.
And what has he done for Alberta? Absolutely nothing. If you look in the budget, there's $27 million for improving the diversification of Western economy. $27 million. And then $100 million for oil and gas support. You know what they put aside for subsidies for wealthy people to buy electric vehicles? Almost $500 million. Wow. And yet, here we have the Minister of Natural Resources from Alberta, Edmonton Mill Woods. We get $27 million for diversification. With friends like these, Mr. Speaker. And then we have the member from Edmonton Centre. When I asked him what his thoughts are about the no new pipeline bill, C-69, what about the offshore tanker ban that only bans Alberta oil? It doesn't ban tankers, it just bans Alberta oil. I asked him about that and all their other punitive policies against Alberta. He stood up and said he was proud. He was proud to push through C-69, which will see not a single new energy project ever again in Alberta. He was proud to see our oil banned off the West Coast, but happily bring it in from Venezuela and Saudi Arabia. Shameful. I had a letter in from a lady named Holly. We asked, are you better off? She goes, seriously, can anyone be better off? We lost our small business of 20 years. We paid our taxes and paid our staff. The bank took our house, which guaranteed our small business loan, which we hadn't missed a payment on. All of our employees, including 4 family members, are all out of work. We're jobless and homeless, and the government just keeps destroying the economy. I want to repeat that last line. We are jobless and homeless, and the government just keeps on destroying the economy. Remember back a couple of years ago when the Prime Minister was in Calgary and confronted with these things, and his comment was, just hang in there. Well, people like Holly cannot just hang in there. This government's policies are destroying the livelihoods. They're destroying the hope of people living in Alberta. Brian writes in, I am worse off. I live in subsidized housing in Edmonton. The cost of living has gone up a great deal, but not our income. We all got a raise from the Alberta government, but not even $2. 30% goes to my apartment costs, so what did I get? We get a carbon tax. 30 of that went to the apartment costs. Anything we get, 30% goes to the cost of our apartment. Now, the government will stand up again. We heard it just recently, the $40 billion, apparently it's $50 billion now, their national housing program. Well, I want to read a quote from the IFSD. That's the Institute of Fiscal Studies and Democracy that's headed up by former Parliamentary Budget Officer Kevin Page. This is what they write. And they've looked for where this money is. They say, the Liberals' NHS looks like, apart from the glossy document that accompanied its announcement, or it looks like nothing except a glossy document that accompanied its announcement. Unfortunately for now, the NHS is virtually nowhere to be seen in the federal fiscal framework. So Liberals say $40 billion. We saw the Prime Minister and the Parliamentary Secretary responsible for this both stand and say, we've housed 1 million people. They actually told people that. To the Toronto Star, the Pravda of North America came out and said, well, actually it wasn't, it was only 13,000. Their own departmental results showed it was 13,000, they claimed 1 million. But they say just now, $50 billion. Kevin Page's outfit says they're going to find $1.3 billion in the first 5 years, $5.1 billion over 10 years. Now I'm running out of time. I just want to put in a last comment from Helmut. Much worse than a year ago. As a senior on income security, the provision is not keeping pace with the rise in expenses. And this is what we're seeing from Canadians when we talk to them. They're barely treading water. They're not getting ahead as generations have before them. Every time they take a step forward, this government drags them back 2 steps, whether it's a carbon tax, taking away other tax credit, pushing through debt that pushes up our interest rates. Canadians are not getting ahead. Now, Alberta, on Tuesday, when Jason Kenney becomes Premier, we'll take our first step to fixing the problems with Alberta. And October 21, we'll take the next step when we turf this government and bring back a Conservative government.
Well done. Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. The honourable member for Winnipeg North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, I must thank the member for not actually moving adjournment. I know yesterday, as they moved adjournment because they didn't want to debate, maybe go home a little early. So I'm grateful that the member didn't move adjournment this day, Mr. Speaker. Having said that, you know, the member talked a lot of negativism about Alberta, and I really would like to say the people of Alberta, in fact, all the prairies. I am a member of Parliament from the prairies, and this government has delivered in many different ways, put money in the pockets of Canadians throughout, but in particular, when I think of Western Canada and our prairies, I think of things such as the Canada Child Benefit, the GIS increase. I also think of the infrastructure. In this last budget, in fact, one of the wonderful initiatives, I believe, is where we're taking a portion of gas tax going directly to municipalities. So a city like Winnipeg, for example, Mr. Speaker, is going to be spending roughly about another $37 million as a direct result of this particular government. Now, that's all in building or reconstructing roads and things of this nature. Infrastructure is something that's very important to this government. It has been virtually from day one. And my question to my colleague and friend across the way, would he not recognize that over and above many of the positive, progressive social benefits that individuals are receiving, but there is also within the budget some very positive things in which municipalities are going to be able to take advantage of in order to build healthier infrastructures throughout the province, throughout our prairie provinces, which is a really good thing.
Member for Edmonton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I appreciate my colleague's comments and his humor. It's always funny watching a Liberal stand up and try to explain all the great things they've done for Western Canada, such as C-69, the No New Pipeline bill, such as C-48. And it's amazing again that we had 4, now down to 3 Liberal MPs from Alberta betray the people of Alberta by supporting Liberal plans to destroy our energy industry. Now, his comment about the infrastructure, again, I have to laugh at this. The Senate, the independent-controlled Senate, filled with Liberal senators and Liberal appointees, came out a report says there's no metric for success for the infrastructure spending by the government apart from money spent. So it's like, are we spending money so that people can get to work faster, we can improve productivity, which we're not, or improve the environment? No, the Liberal plan is not any of those. Their metric of success is spending. We saw the spending for Alberta. The Prime Minister stood up and talked about it the other day. He bragged about putting ashtrays at bus stops in Alberta. We've got 100,000 unemployed energy workers, and the government is standing bragging about upgrading a bus stop with their infrastructure money. This government has failed Alberta, and here's another perfect example of it. Thank you.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. The honourable member for Vancouver Kingsway.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, we saw what a conservative budget looks like in this country with the tabling of the Doug Ford budget, and we saw that in their obsessive fixation on the debt and deficit, that they're cutting healthcare in Ontario to less than the rate of inflation. We know that healthcare costs are growing a little over 5%, and the Doug Ford Conservatives have capped it at 1.6%, which means one thing. It means more patients in hallways. It means Ontarians getting sicker and not having the healthcare system that they need. Now, I noticed in the Liberal budget, they're cutting healthcare federal budget from $3.5 billion to $2.5 billion. These Liberals are taking $1 billion out of the federal healthcare system. So my question to my honourable colleague is this: I know that his party is really as equally concerned about the debt and deficit as the Doug Ford Conservatives are. So does he agree with the Liberal government's budget that will take $1 billion out of the federal budget for healthcare? Is that something that were he to form government, he would countenance and agree with?
Honourable member for Edmonton West in 35 seconds or less.
I'd like to thank my colleague for the question. I think he meant to say when we form government. But this is the issue. If we're spending $33 billion in interest 4 years from now, that's money that cannot be spent on health care. That's money that cannot be spent supporting families and children. Conservatives don't like to go on about the debt because we like to see black ink in the ledger. It's because debt and interest payments have victims. And those victims are average Canadians who need to get ahead but are being held back big onerous interest payments, money taken out of their pocket and put in the pockets of wealthy bankers instead of services in Canada. Thank you.
Right on. Resuming debate, reprise du débat, l'honorable député de Louis.
The honourable member for Louis Saint Laurent. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very pleased to have this opportunity to speak to the bill tabled by the Minister of Finance 3 weeks ago.
Thank my colleague from Edmonton West. It's a real privilege and an honor to sit with them at the Operation Government Committee. Each and every day, each and every time I have the chance to be behind him at the committee, I learn so much. As all Canadians learned so much a week ago when the honourable member from Edmonton West gave the information to all Canadians in an interview with the National Post that the government cannot count correctly. This is absolutely crazy, Mr. Speaker. We're talking about a budget. We're talking about billions of dollars, and they cannot make the right number at the right place. Hopefully, Mr. Speaker, as said in a tweet, the member from Carleton, Canada is blessed to have the member of Edmonton West who is doing such a great work in the committee, in-house, in his writing, and for Canada. Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, on that. Alors, Monsieur le Président.
Now, Mr. Speaker, the fourth budget brought down by the Minister of Finance is their last budget before the people of Canada vote 6 months from now. And now let's talk about the state of the Canadian economy. When Canadians decided to give the Liberals, put the Liberals in power. At the end of 2015, when the Liberals took power, the previous government had left a surplus of $2.9 billion. The previous government had left Canada in an enviable position because we had the best debt to GDP ratio in the G7. We were the first country to have gotten out of the worst recession since the 20s in the G7. And We left the fiscal house in order. The Conservatives left the best GDP to debt ratio in the G7, and the economy expanded. What did the Liberals do with this extraordinary gift left to them by the Conservative government? Well, let's not forget that during the last election campaign, they put their hands on their hearts and promised small deficits and a zero deficit in 2019. I can never refer to this document enough. I think they refused to allow me to table their document, but it's not because they're refusing to talk about the reality of their document that we'll stop talking about it. In 2015, they said on page 94, under a Liberal government, the federal government will record a modest deficit of less than $10 billion over 4 years, which will enable Canada to, and I'm again referring back to the actual text of the document, which will enable us to return to a balanced budget in 2019. Now, it says return to a balanced budget in 2019-2020. Those were the commitments. And that's why the Liberal Party was elected. That's why what Canadians voted for when they voted for Liberal candidates. So what's the result? Well, first of all, 3 small deficits? No, the reality is 3 deficits. 18 billion the first time, 18 the second, and 18 the third. This year, $19.8 billion. So their first commitment, 3 small deficits. Well, no, what we've seen 3. That's the reality of the Liberal government and under the administration of the Minister of Finance. Then we hit 2019-2020, the budget that was brought down a few weeks ago, where once again they promised that they were going, or the year that they had promised to eliminate the deficit. And there was an English debate at the last one. The Prime Minister looked everybody straight in the eyes. They looked Canadians straight in the eyes and said, I give you my word. We are going to balance the budget in 2019-2020. Well, Canadians, through you, Mr. Speaker, Canadians, unfortunately, you had the wool pulled over your eyes by the Prime Minister because not only have they reduced the deficit, it's the biggest one, almost $20 billion, Mr. Speaker. It's unacceptable to see that they showed so much contempt for their promises. They simply pushed aside their campaign and said, well, forget about the zero deficit. It's party year because we're heading to an election. And that is what we're seeing, Mr. Speaker. That's the problem with this deficit. It is a bill that we are passing on to our children, our grandchildren, and to their grandchildren, children and grandchildren, because we couldn't manage the system properly now. A family can't always live on their credit margin, on a line of credit. They can't max out their credit cards. At some point, they have to pay. And that's what's unfortunate. That's what we're seeing with this government. They say, we are a government that looks after families. We are looking after children. We take to heart the fate of children. Well, they are showing how much they love families. They're sending the bill on to their children and children's children. Now, Mr. Speaker, if the economic theory, unprecedented, that's never been picked up by anyone else, had been put in place, whereby the Prime Minister said the budget will balance itself, well, we've got this situation. I'm still waiting for experts from the London School of Economics or Harvard from across the world who could say, well, is there someone out there who agrees with the Prime Minister that the burlesque theory that budgets balance themselves? Is there anyone? Let's also not forget that they said, well, it's actually written in black and white here in their platform on page 94 again. We will invest in infrastructure to stimulate the economy. Now, Mr. Speaker, that's not what they did at all. The infrastructure program that they had announced with a lot of fanfare said the biggest one in the history of Canada will invest in infrastructure. Well, 3.5 years later, it's 10% of what they'd committed to invest. So they'd expected to invest in infrastructure, to pay down the deficit, etc. There was some kind of logic there. And there's logic there. But they didn't even respect it. It's like borrowing money to pay for your groceries. Borrowing money to buy a house, yes, but not for groceries, Mr. Speaker. So that's why this is the budget of broken promises. And this is the Liberal carbon tax, the year of the Liberal carbon tax. And to Canadians, through you, Mr. Speaker, expect your prices to go up because the carbon tax will not reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It will serve to put more money or take more money out of the pockets of Canadian citizens, Canadian taxpayers. Now, when we put in requests for information to look at the study of the impact on families that this carbon tax would have, we received information saying here are the impacts, and it was all redacted. There was nothing visible. So they wanted to hide information from Canadians, relevant information. Secondly, some say that it won't be $500 a ton. It'll be 6 times worse than what they had told Canadians. So we have to be careful and watch that as well. And ultimately, Mr. Speaker, someone will say, well, just a moment here. This tax is a way, well, this is what they say, in fact. It's a way of putting a price on pollution to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Mr. Speaker, it doesn't work. And I'm not giving you an exaggeration or a fictional case. Let's look at Quebec, where for over 3 years we've had the carbon trade. It is a tax on pollution, and it's on an exchange. It was adopted by the National Assembly. It's been in place for 3 years, and after 2 years in operation with the carbon exchange, what has the real impact of those measures been on greenhouse gas emissions? Zero. So that's why those who are trying to get Canadians to believe that a carbon tax will reduce greenhouse gas emissions are fooling Canadians. For people who think that it's the opposite, no, the facts have proven it to be wrong, the facts from Quebec. I would be more than happy to table that information if the members opposite would agree. And these facts show that greenhouse gas emissions were not reduced and, in fact, will not be reduced by a carbon tax. This is the budget of broken promises, where people were fooled over a 3-year period of time, where in 6 months Canadians will have an opportunity to vote on people who have misled them with respect to spending that will affect Canadians' children and their children for years to come. Questions and comments. The Honourable Member for Louis-Hébert. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now we have to look at the legacy of the Harper government. What they did was he left Canadians in a recession. Now my question for the member opposite is what tax approach would he use? Now I see him rise. He's indignant. He's not happy that we abolished the public transit tax credit, the non-refundable credit, which for him was their way of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Now, he's talked about that so many times over the past 3 years. It was a $13 tax credit. It wasn't refundable, but he's talked about it so many times. He's credited this $13.25 non-refundable tax credit, but he voted against the Canada Child Benefit, which on average gives $5,500 to some to many families in his riding. $5,500 to some 12,500 families. 23,000 children in his riding are receiving that. He voted against it. Will he go back on that? Is that what he's proposing, to abolish the Canada Child Benefit, to go back to his public transit non-refundable tax credit that's $13.50 a month? If that's his plan, then bring it on, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint-Laurent. Well, I will contradict some of the comments made by the member for Louis Hébert. There is an over $2 billion surplus that the Conservative government left this Liberal government. Those are the facts confirmed by the PBO. We brought the country out of the worst recession since the 1920s, and we did so brilliantly. We were the best in the G7. We left Canada in an enviable position. We left Canada in a position in 2016, 2017, 2018. There was economic prosperity. Those people were lucky. They were lucky, and they used that fortunate situation. We left them to create debt for our children and grandchildren. And what else did he do? He said we didn't do anything for the environment, but greenhouse gas emissions were reduced by 2.2%. We had other programs as well. And who has congratulated our eco-efficiency program? Greenpeace. Greenpeace. And so I would be more than happy to table that document as well in this House. But if our government put in place a tax credit for Canadians who take the bus, and it's unacceptable for the government to have eliminated that tax credit for Canadians. We can talk about public transit if he wants to. There's a big fight. The federal government is fighting with the provincial level, and the member for Louis Hébert recently insulted his provincial counterpart, the Deputy Premier of Quebec. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to invite the member for Louis Hébert to sit down and do his homework properly. Questions and comments. The Honourable Member for Sherbrooke. Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I will ask a question that has gone unanswered by the Conservatives, who always speak passionately about the deficit. But a question that they don't answer is how they're going to manage public finances, what their plan will be for the next election. Will they balance the budget? And if the question is how they will do so, how will they balance the budget? Will they have the audacity, like we did, to seek out revenues so that they can fund public services? Or will they use the same approach that all Conservatives in the country do? Will they simply cut and turn to austerity? What choice will they make will the Conservatives make in their next budget platform or campaign platform? The Honourable Member. I'd like to thank my colleague, the member for Sherbrooke, for his pertinent question. And I salute him and his party for having the honour, the dignity, and the sense of responsibility in 2015 to put forth a platform where they campaigned against a deficit and for a balanced budget. The Liberals said, no, we have to be progressive. We have to take action. But the Liberals, not only did they not keep their promise, but they have indebted the country with no plan to return to a balanced budget. Now, with respect to returning to a balanced budget, as you might understand, Mr. Speaker, that's 6 months out. I can tell you that we will be putting forth a fiscal framework where we will reach the objectives as we set them. And I would invite all colleagues and others that instead of fear-mongering, people have said that the budget in Ontario isn't problematic. Even Chantal Hébert has said that it was an acceptable budget for the province. It being 1:30, the House will now proceed to private members' business as listed on the order paper.
Private members' business, consideration at report stage of Bill C-417, an act to amend the Criminal Code, disclosure of information by jurors at report stage. So in the name of Mr. Cooper.
There being no motions at report stage, the House will now proceed without debate to putting the question on the motion to concur with the bill at report stage. Mr. Cooper, seconded by Mr. Lloyd, moves that Bill C-417, an act to amend the Criminal Code, disclosure of information by jurors, as amended by concurred in the report stage. Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? All those in... Oh, everybody's agreed. Perfect. Just go down here. Okay, I declare the motion carried. When shall the bill be read a third time? Now? Now. Mr. Cooper, seconded by Mr. Lloyd, moves that Bill C-417, an act to amend the Criminal Code, disclosure of information by jurors, be now read a third time and do pass. Debate. The Honourable Member for St. Albert, Edmonton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's an honor to rise and speak at third reading stage of my private member's bill C-417. This is a bill that arises from a key recommendation of a unanimous report of the Justice Committee respecting juror supports. It is a study that was initiated thanks to the leadership of the Honourable Member for Cowichan, Malahat, and Langford. And during the course of that study, we heard from former jurors whose lives have forever been changed as a result of doing nothing more than their civic duty. Former jurors who sat through horrific evidence in gruesome trials and as a result have suffered from mental health issues, including PTSD. And I want to thank those jurors who came before us for having the courage to do so, because it's not easy to do, including Mark Farrant, Daniel Cozine, Michael Swan, Patrick Fleming, Tina Dancer, and Scott Blue. One of the things that these jurors said is an impediment to getting the mental health support that they require is the jury secrecy rule. The jury secrecy rule makes it a criminal code offense pursuant to Section 649 to disclose any aspect of the jury deliberation process for life, even to a mental health professional. It begs the question, how is it possible for a former juror to get the therapeutic or counseling support that they require when they're unable to have a free exchange with a medical health professional about what is one of, if not the most stressful aspects of jury service, to be silenced from being able to speak to a medical health professional about the core of their injury. That, Mr. Speaker, is precisely what Bill C-417 seeks to change by carving out a narrow exception to the jury secrecy rule so that a former juror who is suffering from mental health issues arising from their jury service can speak to a mental health professional about all aspects of their jury service. It's a bill that protects the integrity of the jury secrecy rule because, again, it would be in a strictly confidential context post-trial while allowing for that vital exchange between a former juror and a medical health practitioner so that they can get the help that they need and the help that they deserve. I have to say that I have thought long and hard about there being any argument against this bill, and I really can't think of an argument. It's why, when the Justice Committee studied this, every witness who appeared from the mental health community to former jurors to the legal community endorsed this change. It's why it was a key unanimous recommendation of the Justice Committee juror support study. It's why, when my bill was introduced at second reading, it passed unanimously in this House. It's why, when it went to the Justice Committee for further study, it passed unanimously, subject to some minor technical amendments. Mr. Speaker, if there ever was an amendment to the criminal code that everyone can agree on, it is surely this change. And so what is needed now is to make sure that we can get this across the finish line, that we can get it passed. The time for debate really is over. What we need to do today is allow this bill to go forward so that we can get it over to the Senate so that it has a fighting chance of being passed before the expiration of this Parliament. So I implore my colleagues to join me this afternoon in seeing that that happens, because after all of the work, and I want to specifically acknowledge, there are many members from all sides of the House that I'd like to thank, but I would like to specifically acknowledge the leadership of our chair, the member for Mount Royal, who has been tireless in his efforts to see this bill advance. And so, Mr. Speaker, let's come together, let's get this over to the Senate, and let's get Bill C-417 passed before the end of this Parliament. Thank you.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for Parkdale High Park.
So I appreciate the member opposite's commitment to this issue and his work on the Justice Committee as Vice Chair, and I reiterate the comments he's made about the consensual approach that the committee has approached this bill. The committee did look at this bill, and I agree that it should be sent to the Senate and proceeded with forthwith. There's been some discrepancies about other justice bills that are before the Senate, but I won't go into those. Those were raised by Ms. Ambrose previously. But the issue is that at committee, there was a few amendments that were made to the bill, and I think they do, in fact, strengthen them. I was just wondering if I could have the member opposite's comments on that issue. One in particular was this issue about ensuring that people, yes, indeed, can come forward and get counseling and other supports that they may need, but whom they're dealing with and what sort of professional qualifications should those individuals have who are delivering the counseling. So perhaps the member opposite could speak to that important amendment.
Member for St. Albert, Edmonton.
Thank you very much, and I thank the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice for his question and for his support of this bill. Mr. Speaker, there were three very minor amendments at the Senate. One was to deal with the translation issue. Another was to provide a 90-day period upon royal assent to ensure enough time to consult with the provinces and territories to let them know of this change. And then the third amendment, which the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary spoke to, was to clarify that a medical health professional that would be subject to this is a medical health professional who is licensed to practice in the provinces. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires? Questions et commentaires? Questions and comments? Resuming debate, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the opportunity to speak today to Bill C-417. I want to thank the members of the Standing Committee on Justice and Human Rights for the study that they did and for the hard work that they did in order to move the debate forward on the question of the mental health of jurors. I want to commend the amendments to the bill that were made by the Justice Committee, and I encourage all members to support them too. Before I speak about those amendments, I want to speak about the bill itself, as well as the purpose of Section 649 of the Criminal Code and the way it compares to offenses in other jurisdictions. The underlying objective of this bill is no doubt a laudable one, as it proposes a criminal code amendment that seeks to help jurors who face mental health challenges following jury duty. It proposes to do so by amending Section 649, which has been identified as posing an impediment for jurors needing mental health support after the completion of a jury trial. Like other members of this House, I believe that it is important for jurors to get the support that they need in the aftermath of their service. Specifically, the amendment proposed in Bill C-417 would permit jurors to discuss jury deliberations with healthcare professionals after the trial in order to address health issues that have arisen as a result of their jury duties. It would do so by adding an exception to the offense of disclosure of jury proceedings under Section 649 of the Criminal Code. As has been mentioned by the sponsor of the bill and other members of this House, the proposal seeks to implement a unanimous recommendation from the Justice Committee's May 2018 report, which was entitled Improving Support for Jurors in Canada. With few exceptions, Section 649 prohibits jurors from disclosing any information relating to jury deliberations or other information not shared in open court. The prohibition in Section 649 applies to matters intrinsic to the jury deliberation process, such as the opinions, thoughts, statements, arguments, and votes of individual jurors. It also applies, for example, to the slightest comment between jurors while walking out of the courtroom or while exiting the courthouse. The purpose of the prohibition is to promote free and frank debate in the jury room and to allow for independent and effective juries free from the pressures of public scrutiny or fear of reprisal. It also supports the finality of verdicts and public confidence in the administration of justice. Jurors may discuss evidence or other information disclosed in the courtroom, since such information is publicly available. What this means, for example, is that there is currently no legal impediment if a juror wishes to seek mental health support in relation to a gruesome video or photograph presented as evidence in court. Indeed, as was mentioned in earlier debates, many provinces and territories, including Alberta, British Columbia, Ontario, Quebec, Saskatchewan, and Yukon, offer juror support programs that tackle the mental health consequences of this aspect of jury duty. Section 649 targets out-of-court discussions about jury deliberations and makes it a summary conviction offense to disclose such information. The offense applies to every juror and every person providing support services to a juror with a physical disability. It may also interest members of the House to know that some provincial and territorial legislation, applying to both criminal and civil jury proceedings, establishes an offense that seeks to address a similar issue as that in Section 649. For example, Yukon's Jury Act prohibits any person who is a member of the jury from disclosing or discussing in any manner the nature or content of jury discussions.
Testimony provided to the Justice Committee during its study on jurors, Mr. Speaker, Ms. Tina Danzer, who had been a juror for the Paul Bernardo trial in the 1990s, described that part of the trauma of serving on a jury that comes from what jurors are not allowed to discuss. More recently, Mr. Marc Ferrand told the Justice Committee during its study of Bill C-417 that after he had served on a jury in a murder trial, many mental health professionals were unwilling to take him on as a client at all because of perceived legal conflicts due to the jury secrecy rule, which I was describing. So even though jurors are able to talk about whatever becomes part of the court record, including horrific and traumatic evidence, jury secrecy still operates as a barrier to some jurors in accessing mental health care for their own trauma. Bill C-417 will change that, which is what makes this such an important bill. Internationally, a similar rule prohibiting the disclosure of jury deliberations is found in the United Kingdom and in various states in Australia. The Justice Committee's report takes note of legislation in the Australian state of Victoria, which includes an exception that permits a former juror to disclose information related to deliberations to a registered medical practitioner or registered psychologist while being treated in relation to issues arising out of their service. In the United States, once the trial is over, jurors are generally free to discuss the events of the trial and jury deliberations unless a specific court order bars them from doing so. What that means is that jurors in the United States can talk with nearly anyone about juror deliberations, including a talk show host or national television or across the internet. This approach, which offers limited protection for juror privacy, is significantly different from the Canadian model. I think we would all agree that Canadian citizens may be reluctant to serve on juries if it is contemplated that their deliberations would be made public, or if they may be subjected to probing and intrusive questioning about discussions and opinions expressed during deliberations. It thus remains critical to ensure the privacy, safety, and security of jurors who perform the invaluable civic duty of serving on a jury. Against this backdrop, I'd like to turn my attention to the substance of Bill C-417 and why, as I have already mentioned, the government supports this bill with the amendments that were adopted at committee. The amendments have added clarity to the proposed change to Section 649, and they're consistent with what the bill seeks to achieve. One of the amendments was discussed earlier. It's about specifying who is a healthcare professional by clarifying that it must be a professional who is regulated or licensed in the province or territory, similar to what is found in the Australian example. The impact of this amendment is that it will provide for greater clarity that jurors can only disclose information to a member of a regulated health profession with governing rules of conduct and codes of ethics, including duties of confidentiality. Such a change is consistent with ensuring that the integrity of the jury secrecy rule is maintained, notwithstanding the new exception to Section 649 that is being proposed. The other amendment is relatively minor, addressing a discrepancy in the language versions of the bill. And finally, the Justice Committee agreed on an amendment to the bill to provide for a coming into force date of 90 days after royal assent, to give provinces and territories time to prepare for the implementation of the change in the law. As the sponsor of the bill noted at committee, the purpose of the amendment is to get provinces and territories the time to get up to speed with the change. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, I believe that the Justice Committee's amendments strengthen this bill, responding to the issues raised before the committee. As such, the government will be accepting the committee's recommendation to adopt this bill as amended at third reading. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
Reprise du débat, resuming debate, l'honorable député de Sherbrooke.
The honourable member for Sherbrooke. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'm pleased to indicate my support for Bill C-417 on behalf of the NDP caucus. And I will also say that I will be brief because I know that time is a bit of an issue here when it comes to Bill C-417, and we'd like to get it through as quickly as possible to the Senate, to the other place, I should say. So I think that this is a very common sense bill. The Justice Committee clearly recognized that, and they recommended that the government move forward with it, with that small amendment, so that jurors could talk to health professionals in the mental health area. So I think that this is really a common sense issue. And there have been many issues where jurors have had very difficult, traumatizing experiences. It's not always easy to deal with things like that in a jury. It's not always easy to make a final verdict either. That can be very difficult. And to walk away from that without any second thoughts or remorse. So it's good for jurors to have that support. The law currently prevents people from having the ability to disclose some of the issues that happen during the proceedings. So I think it just makes sense to give jurors that opportunity to talk to mental health professionals who themselves are bound by secrecy, professional secrecy. So it makes sense that they should be able to speak to their clients in a very confidential manner. So I think everyone should be So rest assured that the confidentiality aspect will be maintained. I think that it's very clear that we will be supporting this today, and I think that we should ask the other place to move forward very quickly with this bill. On other bills, we've seen that the Senates have been dragging their feet, unfortunately, on quite a number of other bills, including ones that received the unanimous support of this House. So we certainly hope that the other chamber will move forward with this bill very quickly. I don't want to take up more time than that, Mr. Speaker. I know that we don't have a lot of time left between now and the end of the session, so I very sincerely hope that my other colleagues will be brief as well so that we can move forward with this very common sense bill that is really going to help jurors living through difficult situations. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Reprise du débat, resuming debate. The honourable member for Richmond Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to join the debate on Bill C-417 today and also state that I'm full support of the bill. As we know, the Standing Committee on the Justice and Human Rights has studied this proposed legislation and has reported back with 3 amendments. In my view, the amendments to Bill C-417 that were made by the Justice Committee have improved the drafting of this legislation and will ensure it better achieves its stated objective. I encourage all honourable members to support this amendment as soon as possible so it can go to the other place and it be tabled on second reading. Along with the other members of this House, I applaud the small but important change proposed in Bill C-417, which would facilitate better access to mental health support for jurors. Mr. Speaker, as a person who has dealt with mental health issues, I totally understand the need for the jurors to be able to have access to professional services so they can share their story and gain the support that's needed for them. It became clear through the Justice Committee study on counseling and other mental health support for jurors, which culminated in May 22, 2018 report, Improving Support for Jurors in Canada, that Section C 649 of the Criminal Code has been an impediment to jurors seeking support following their service. I appreciate that this bill addresses the serious issue of mental health as it relates to individuals who participate in their criminal justice system. Our consideration of the bill has been informed by the Justice Committee report, which documents the evidence and perspective of witnesses regarding the impact of criminal justice system on jurors. A number of former jurors, as my colleague across the aisle mentioned, who served on difficult and disturbing criminal jury, provided testimony before the committee that has highlighted the importance of ensuring that jurors are not left without any means to address the stress and trauma they may have experienced as a result of their important civic duty. In addition, the Justice Committee heard from a variety of experts, including justice professionals, academics, government representatives of juror support programs, as well as Mental Health and Lawyers Association. These experts expressed the common view that the stresses associated with jury service can be prevented or reduced by being better prepared, as well as improving the condition on which they carry out their duty and offering psychological support. There were totally 11 recommendations made in the report, touched upon various issues, including recommendation 4, which calls for the amendment to section 649 of the Criminal Code, and that's why Bill C-417 addresses this recommendation and will contribute to the better psychological support for the juror. I believe that the juror would continue to feel confident that discussion taking place between them and in the jury room would continue to remain private, so that they would be able to continue to engage in full and frank discussion despite the change in the law, and yet be able to receive the services that are needed once they feel those services are deemed necessary. As said, we as the government support the objectives sought by this bill. That is why our government seeks certain targeted amendments, and those amendments were identified. There are 3 specific amendments. The first one is specifically dealing to ensure that the healthcare professional must be licensed, as my colleague across the aisle mentioned. The second amendment is a minor amendment, making sure that the English and French version are in sync. And the third amendment is basically looking for 90 days after the bill receives the royal assent to ensure that all the necessary preparation is taken for its effective implementation. I believe that this bill, with amendments adopted at the committee, strikes the appropriate balance between protecting the privacy interests of juror and ensuring that the juror can access effective mental health treatment following their service should they need it. As I said at the outset, I support Bill C-417 and the amendment that was adopted by the Justice Committee, which will ensure its better achievement is objective. I also believe that this bill aligns with other government initiative, i.e. Bill C-79, doing to improve the jury regime in Canada. I'll be voting in favor of this bill. I thank my colleague for his advocacy for mental health and the great work that he's doing. I'll be also, as I said, I'll be voting in favor in the third reading. And Mr. Speaker, as I am the last speaker from our caucus, from this side, before the House rises for the next 2 weeks, I'd like to wish everyone and all my colleagues and all Canadians a happy Easter. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Resuming debate. Resuming debate. Reprise du débat. The honourable member for St. Albert Edmonton has the right to reply. No. Pardon? Very good.
Well, the sunshine.
The question is as follows. Mr. Cooper, seconded by Mr. Lloyd, moved that Bill C-417, an act to amend the Criminal Code, disclosure of information by jurors, be now read a third time and do pass. Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Ever carried. Just wanted to double check.
Third reading of this bill, troisième lecture de ce projet de loi.
It being now 1:55, the House stands adjourned until Monday, April 29th, 2019 at 11 a.m. Pursuant to Standing Orders 28.2 and 24.1, I want to wish all the members a very happy Easter, joyeuse Pâques à tous les membres. Merci. Merci.